Oh, we are the valiant infantry.
Don't talk, stay alive.
We are the alpha team with passion and camaraderie.
Hear us to shout at the top of our lungs. Become bold and raise your guns. Remember what I told you yesterday? Let's start the fight.
Earth Defense Force 5 is a great game, and a fantastic follow-up to the previous entry in the series, 4.1. Instead of giving a brief overview at the start, we're going to dive right in, as there's a considerable number of changes, updates, and additions to get to. If you don't have any exposure and want to see what the EDF franchise is all about, I recently uploaded a recommending the Earth Defense Force series video on the channel a week before publishing this review, so maybe go check that out if you want a quick rundown. Without further preamble, let's start discussing Earth Defense Force 5. While I normally don't start out with the best things up front, today it'll be a little different. The enemies in EDF 5 are literally what kickstarted my interest in making videos on these games. I wanted so badly to have an avenue to discuss and showcase how amazing the Frog and Alien Infantry are, but because no one else was diving into the series, I felt the need to start from 2017. Now that we're finally here... oh man, I can't believe it's finally time. Among the many differences from 4.1 to 5, one of the biggest is the removal of the Hector enemies. They were, and still are, a staple of that time in EDF, representing the robot attack force of the Ravagers and the connected story of 2017 and 4.1. They were one of the many highlights. I praised their goofy-looking visuals, their dramatic reactions to being struck, and so on. They're great, and my friend and I both were saddened to not see any this time round, until, that is, we started to understand just how excellent their replacements were, both in terms of gameplay and with how our NPCs would talk about them. These are giant frogs with what appears to be mind control and other such metal devices hooked up to them. You might be saying, oh, a giant version of a normally tiny Earth creature, that's nothing that new. Well, for some reason, the EDF army views them a little differently.
Oh no! I just saw aliens! I can't believe they're real! What the hell? We've been fighting those outer space monsters all this time and it just came to you? I'm not talking about monsters! I'm talking about humanoid aliens!
We have a reported sighting of humanoid aliens.
Humanoid aliens?
Extraterrestrial beings similar to humans.
You mean aliens that look like humans?
One head, two eyes, with hands and feet. Bipedal.
Almost identical to humans. This is unbelievable.
Okay, you might be thinking, hey now, they are humanoid to some extent, they're not wrong. I mean, 2 arms, 2 legs, bipedal, sure. But no, they aren't saying they merely have human characteristics, they keep doubling down on them looking just like humans.
Are they aliens? They look like humans! They look just like humans. The resemblance is unbelievable. They have mouths, too! They look like they're talking! So they have their own language just like humans?
Some soldiers can't bring themselves to fight back, it's like looking in a mirror for them.
They look like us! I can't do it! They're carrying weapons! If you don't kill them, you'll be killed!
To really hammer this home, at one point they wonder if they, the aliens, are weak to water like in some sci-fi movies.
If this was a sci-fi movie, the aliens would be afraid of water. Yeah, it's still possible. Once it rains, they'll all drop dead.
To reiterate, they wonder if these frogs are weak to water. Amazing. Once the first rain level starts, they're saddened that they, in fact, aren't weak to water.
Those alien bastards look like they're afraid of water, but they aren't.
They look very much alive.
The icing on top is when we discover the cosmonaut gray aliens. They behave the same in combat, but are more aggressive and have armor. Their visuals are what's important for now, though, as even though these guys more resemble humans than the frogs do, well, that's not how our EDF soldiers see it.
What are they? They look disgusting. They're different from the aliens we've seen in the past. They're not humanoids. They sure don't look human to me. Aliens things that don't look like humans.
This is why my friend and I, during our playthroughs of the game, more often called these Froggos humans opposed to their actual name, colonists. Just a great showing of how these games can be funny as hell. Going back to the talking point from my Insect Armageddon video, the mainline series walks the camp tightrope very delicately. These giant frogs look ridiculous, clearly, but the NPCs are frightened of them, and add to the comedy by playing the oblivious straight man, unaware of the fact that they're staring at literal frogs and not humans. It's easy to fall into the realm of so goofy that nothing matters, too serious with less room for laughter, or too on the nose with characters written like they're trying to be comedians. This is a good balance, and it has been since 2017. Now for the gameplay. The AI, loadout, and height of the frogs and aliens encourage a type of gameplay I never thought I'd ever see in an Earth Defense Force game. Cover shooters have existed for a while. In some, you can crouch behind obstacles freely, others you attach yourself onto a waist-high pile of sandbags or a wall or what have you and pop out in a contextual fashion. First-person shooters, you might lean around a corner to get a decent angle. Well, in EDF 5, the buildings act as your cover, and theirs as well. The urban city streets are your war zone. You'll duck behind alleyways to grant yourself reprieve from the onslaught of human and alien debilitating gunfire, then flank around the block and strike at the unsuspecting forces in hiding. This works best with multiple players, or with NPCs to distract them, as while the frogs and aliens take cover from their suppressing fire, you can clean house with some close-range weapons. The fact that the giant enemy infantry choose to latch themselves onto buildings when pressured, and come out when they feel they have the upper hand, means there's definitely more going on with this AI than your usual ants, spiders, and even Hectors of old. It makes you feel like you're fighting a somewhat intelligent enemy. It's ironic, as on paper, this looks to be a far more rudimentary and standard way of designing a third-person shooter. Bugs and robots were the main gimmick, the unique selling point of the series, and now it's humanoids with guns as your opponent? However, even this embodies the best of the EDF games. The enemy is big, not small, and it's a mostly ridiculous situation all around. Large and silly, yet our characters are taking it seriously? Yep, it's Earth Defense Force alright. It gets better though, as their limbs can be destroyed, which has genuine tactical benefits. Remember me complaining about the underutilization of the limb system in Dead Island? Not here. Blowing off their arm that's holding the gun will significantly aid your cause, as might taking out their legs, since obviously they'll be far slower, and it'll keep their gunshots closer to the ground, which could have its own benefits. Even here though, they can crawl, surprisingly fast sometimes, and aren't shy about keeping on the pressure from their low vantage point, which is awesome. The reason all of this works so well is twofold. One, they aren't a single hit away from death when a limb gets removed. Each appendage seems to have its own individual health pool, and the overall HP of the enemy is much higher. Second, and this one is massive, it's not a foregone conclusion that an enemy is out of the scuffle the moment they lose an arm, as their limbs regenerate after enough time has passed. Both of those make the act of targeting a limb far more satisfying, since it genuinely matters. You might choose to go for their arms exclusively to ease the pressure for a short while, or charge in once they're defenseless to rush one of them down. You can see how it would be very much to your advantage to focus in on a specific frog limb, especially the red ones that have shotguns which stun-lock the hell out of you, but the aliens with the armor, light in the beginning and heavy later on, triple down on this idea. Shredding their armor takes a ton of firepower, and each section, left arm, left leg, body, and head, have their own health pools. Honing in on a leg might be even more beneficial once they regenerate it, since the armor stays out of the equation, only the bare limb itself comes back, meaning you're hitting the overall health pool of the alien once more. Depending on their loadout, your priorities may shift accordingly. Faraway artillery boys or laser snipers are nightmares if left unattended, and getting their weapon arm destroyed is a massive benefit for everyone. Meanwhile, an armored flamethrower dingus is mostly deadly if they get within close range, so maybe you'll blow off their legs and leave them be for a while as you take care of the scarier guys. These giant, limb-regenerating infantry units are just phenomenal. I love them so goddamn much. This, to me, is a perfect showcase of gamers not knowing what they want. Coming from 4.1, I don't think it would have ever occurred to me to hope for an oversized take on the traditional third-person cover-based shooter gameplay, but I'm so happy Sandlot went with it. It fits in surprisingly well, and doesn't take away from the charm or gimmick of the series at all. If anything, it props up something that was already a mainstay, the destructible buildings and environments. Far more than in 2017, these buildings can act as safe havens from specific types of enemy gunfire. For example, as a wing diver, it feels entirely natural to hide from droids while my fuel recharges, or the one time I hid out under the walkway of an apartment or something to protect myself against the pill bugs. The buildings taking more damage to blow up is kind of lame in one sense, since, I mean, come on, it is satisfying to throw a bunch of firecrackers and see them all go toppling down. The assuredness of the environment being torn to shreds back in 2017 was amusing, but now the structures match the surrounding gameplay. Giant enemies firing at you? Take a breather behind some giant cover. It's like poetry, but not boring. I kid, I enjoyed my college English classes, I promise. If you're a stickler for the past destruction, don't worry too much, as although in smaller scale and more guerrilla warfare-styled levels, many of the city blocks could remain untouched, later on, as is tradition in EDF, everything gets blown to high heaven amid the chaos. Plus, you're always allowed to keep blasting the buildings. It usually only takes an extra rocket or two to topple it over, and the cratering effect, which produces a hole where your death-dealing blow hits before the entire building collapses, is just so satisfying. Really, EDF 5 just hits the best of both worlds on this. You can utilize buildings for defense, but certain enemies can remove that layer of concrete. The same goes for them. They can hide behind their appropriately sized defenses, but you also can knock it down to get a clear shot. Or just for fun, you know. This also means air raiders might have to strategize a bit more. Sure, launching a bombing run could nail aliens behind cover, but it could take out that cover for your allies for future waves, which might be a hindrance to the mission later on. Yeah, just remove all the buildings I'm using for cover. That's just great.
I'm just shooting the enemy, my guy.
Yep. Oh, actually, it missed the buildings I was using. Good. You're an idiot. Did you just destroy my building?
Oh.
How? Wow. Great. You destroyed my building, which led me to fucking dying.
Kangaroo court, sir.
Thankfully, if you can't find any intact buildings to hide behind, enemy corpses can temporarily act as shields from certain enemy gunfire. Thank goodness, as their bodies getting in the way of items is a huge hassle sometimes, so it's nice that they can be put to good use depending on the situation. As a whole, I can't speak positively enough about the alien infantry. The frog humans and armored grey boys are some of the best enemies in the series, and the robotic Hectors not being an obligatory afterthought inclusion is nice. Keep them special. If they show up in later games, I'll be happy, but if not, we always have 2017 and 4.1. While I do think their strengths are most taken advantage of in the city environments, especially when they're out patrolling or in packs, in other areas they're still pretty good. On flat terrain, they even more resemble Hectors, as they're just guys out in the open. They usually act as a centerpiece to a batch of other variants, but of course later on, you might see dozens of them at once combined with every enemy imaginable, as is the standard for EDF endgame and DLC levels. Speaking of being replaced, in this new alien invasion, tunnel exits that act as spawners aren't a thing anymore. Well, there are some mechanized ones in the cave areas, but no, another update comes in the form of the teleportation anchors, these giant, futuristic-looking robot stakes that fall into the ground. The crystal up top is the weak point, break that and the spawner blows up. The crackling effect, leading into the dramatic explosion when finally destroyed, is surprisingly cathartic. They come in varying heights, some as high up as teleport dropships even, and others shockingly close to the ground. There's some heftier ones after a while, thicker instead of thinner, which take a lot more damage to take down. The dropship spawners are still present, but this new alien force, which the game calls primers this time, opposed to the ravagers of old, seem to really like the color gold. Silver or gray was the default before, but now everything is gaudy, high class, and rich in that golden shine. I'm all about it. Even something as small as a palette change is enough in EDF to make things feel a bit different, which is what I've talked about with the mutated versions of ants like silver, gold, crimson, and so on. Another modification, one from our EDF army this time around, the codenames for the usual enemies have taken on a new direction. Ants are aggressive alien species Alpha, spiders are species Beta, bees are flying aggressors, Retarius is now Arrhenius. Surprisingly, Erginus is still called Erginus, but there's a new kaiju monster this time around, dubbed Archelaus. This Giganto is far more agile, rolling around like an armadillo, shooting out flaming rocks that explode after a while. They're a nice addition, a big target to shoot at for ages, much like the Erginus. The missions where you're simply firing at one until you retreat, which sometimes last 15 minutes or so, aren't by any means the best, but for the narrative, I guess it makes sense. Your soldiers have to visibly struggle with something to later on improve and defeat it. There are also more than a handful of levels where you eventually retreat, with enemies still on screen or a big threat very much intact. These can feel really bad too, since you may have died quite a few times earlier in the mission, and once you finally, complete it, you realize it was just an arbitrary enemy kill count requirement before the commander finally gives the order to retreat officially.
They'll be dominating the ground as long as the base exists. We've been outplayed.
Oh man, a huge buzzkill. Just end the level earlier, man. The first Cosmonaut infantry level was similar. Take a gander at these two deaths side by side, and keep in mind, they're only 20 seconds apart from each other.
It's over. Call off the operation. All units retreat. We will send out the rescue teams. Stay alive. It's over. Call off the operation. All units retreat.
Even worse when you're fighting off an Erginus for a long time, in the mission where you won't be able to kill it anyway, only for the game to disconnect you from the session. Fuck's sake, what a waste of time. When speaking about the Arenaeus, it's now quite a bit easier to maneuver while being held in their spider wire. In 4.1, even flying towards them as a wing diver made no difference, but now you can zip over and free yourself far quicker, doubly so thanks to her new dash boost. The gunships are replaced with what's called a battle drone, a new enemy for me, but not for the series. This was one of the original flying foes from Global Defense Force on the PS2. I really like them in EDF5, their color scheme, the lights activating when they're in attack mode or not, and their destructible metal bodies make them so enjoyable to fight against. That goes for most enemies in the game, actually. Sandlot went hard with making the enemies even more reactive to your shots. Back in 2017, there was a comical quantity of bug juice that filled the air, and now parts of the ant's hide will tear off, and colored insect fluids splatter and stain the environment. Each type gets its own color, it seems. For example, the spiders paint the ground purple. Even before death, the textures of the enemies, robotic or living, crackling and splintering in response to how much damage they've taken helps convey your shots even more. This is all really nice, as it bolsters two main components of the game at once. Of course, it adds to the chaos and goofiness of the ant slaying to see these bits and pieces fly all around, but in that same breath, having the enemies respond so dramatically makes your powerful weapons feel that much stronger. This is very in line with the appeal to the EDF games, just taken to the next level, much like the buildings and the new alien enemies. One more thing about the drones, they seem to be the introduction to the aggro system. In many missions in EDF5, you have a say in when combat starts, and can take on clumps of enemies at your own pace, such as some of the best levels in the game with the alien Froggo-humans. Aggroing and kiting certain enemies isn't completely foreign to the series. 4.1 had a few instances of it, but here it seems far more intentional. The commander and strategic command lady specifically talk about luring the drones in and taking them out one by one. Blue means they're not aggroed, red means they're in attack mode.
The color of the drone is the key. A blue drone is in alert mode and is presumed to be harmless.
It is kind of funny how much they hammer home this bit, but there aren't any obvious hand-holdy tutorials outside the opening level of the game, so I'll take this over a forced gameplay section any day. Another mission where the NPCs reiterate the importance of not engaging with every enemy at once is with the alien soldiers. Here, they very clearly encourage the guerrilla warfare tactics I mentioned earlier.
Humans, they see things with their eyes. We can use this against them. I don't think they're able to attack something they can't see. When they attack us, we just hide in the shadows of buildings.
That is also possible.
It's too hard to deal with all of them at once. We have to take them out one by one.
This pseudo-stealth system as a whole is good. It fits like a glove with the infantry levels especially. The shield bearers are still here, but not as focused on this time it seems. Their AI appears to behave the same way as in 4.1, which is good, and a few levels in particular feel great with them, but with all the added new stuff, they kind of get lost in the shuffle. The flying dragons are replaced with flying tadpole frogs, which is smart, as the dragons always felt really out of place for me, and now these don't represent the end point to their evolution, like that Ravager scientist said, which is silly and ridiculous, but instead the beginning stages of the big frog enemies. This works on a few levels. One, like I said, they can form a bit better, but two, oh god, we're literally murdering the alien younglings. I am become Anakin. Their appearance is really all that's changed though. They have the same attack patterns and fire breath stuff that the dragons had in 4.1. Another blast from the past are the pill bugs, called aggressive alien species Gamma in this game. These guys are humongous trolls. They will grief you until you beg for mercy. I won't have a section dedicated to the knockdown states and reloading and all that this time. I did a thorough job of talking about those intricacies in my 4.1 video, but Species Gamma is the exception. These guys are incredibly imposing, especially deadly if you don't have the proper tools to handle them, as not only can they leap in the air and seek out any would-be snipers or cowards on top of buildings, they knock you down and can chain stun lock you into oblivion if enough of them attack at once. I mentioned that it sometimes can be beneficial to get knocked over in 4.1, since you can use that time to reload if you started, or gain energy as a wing diver and not take any extra damage. Well, that's not really the case with the pill bugs. They're another exception, so if you're an air raider or fencer and start to get ragdolled, you're probably fucked. The damage will keep piling on. Keep this in mind for the class section later, by the way. As difficult as they are, I do think they're a fun addition to the series, even if they kind of were in EDF already prior to 2017. The Droids keep their name, but their appearance got updated. They look a bit more imposing, and now a few of them can fire out slow-moving rocket missile things. Finally, there's the Type 2 drones, which, funny enough, are just the tops of the Droids without legs. Not a whole lot to say about them, but they're good. I like how wide they are, and the way they fold in on themselves when destroyed. The visuals when you deal damage to them, like you're revealing the underlayer coat of paint beneath the golden one, is oddly satisfying. It reminds me of the foil from Wonka candy bars. Naturally, there are also the mutated forms, such as the red version of most enemies, which are overall stronger, and in the case of the human Froggos, tout a far more dangerous and debilitating shotgun. There's also the king spiders, queen ants, death queens, and so on. The stunlock giveaway is still present, letting you know when you've done a significant amount of damage to them, I believe 11% or so. The green ants make a return from the DLC of 4.1, but their first appearance is really close to the end of the game. Their introductory level is basically the exact same as the one found in 4.1's DLC, and they show up in a few missions here and there as a bonus, it feels like. Even cooler though, they get thrown in on some hardest and Inferno missions. For instance, one of the cave finales, which also features Golden Queens, ambushes you with one or two waves of the green ants from behind. I'm all about seeing new and or more enemies and harder difficulties, so this was a welcome inclusion. The giant hives make a comeback, but they're mostly unchanged from 4.1, not a whole lot to say there. Speaking of giant structures though, the replacement to the walking fortress is quite something. Initially it presents itself like an outpost, a weird looking thing with a bunch of turrets, but then we see its true form. It's got crab legs and roams the entire map, destroying buildings in its wake. The missions where you're meant to actually take this thing down take forever. It's jam-packed with auto turrets every which way, dozens of varieties, and their range is ludicrous. Striking its underside hatch is how you deal damage to the crab-like outpost itself, but even approaching it is a death sentence without those turrets out of the equation. Seriously, even when they aren't even rendered, since they're so far away, they can sometimes still hit you with pinpoint accuracy. It's actually bullshit. This is a big reason these levels take so freaking long. How is it able to hit me when I can't even see it on screen? There's no way.
I collect some
There's
stuff.
no way. It's not even on screen and it's still hitting me. It's still hitting me. The most interesting aspect to them, though, is how layered they are, and that the top section seems to exist exclusively to attack cheesy wing divers who choose to fly on top of the outpost. It is satisfying to slowly tick away at all these different types of mounted weapons up top, but the many that are the most dangerous to the wing divers up here are the ones that won't ever affect the ground units. They just fire in all directions aimlessly if nobody is up there. In the first phase of the fight, when it isn't a crab yet, sure, some of those can target everyone on the battlefield, however, even then the ones at the tippy top are seemingly just for show. I have to wonder if Sandlot predicted wing divers would want to fly up, keeping these turrets available solely to be a nuisance for players trying to cheese the outpost levels. Even still, it's hugely beneficial to make the climb, as long as your ground units can handle themselves anyway, as you can also take out the many mounted artillery, genocide guns, and homing rocket shooters that are found up here, which fire at everybody. Those homing rockets are also a new thing. Certain types of droids shoot them, some alien infantry, and of course the outpost. I think they're kinda dumb. They are very slow, and they blow up if you shoot them, both of which are nice, but they never stop and can phase through the environment. As a wing diver, not only can being on top of the outpost itself come in handy for the reasons I've already laid out, but it also lures all the rockets onto you and not your allies. Best course of action is to kite them around for a while, then once enough of them have built up, let one of them hit you, watch the rest chase around and waltz through the outpost itself, then abuse the downstate invulnerability as dozens make contact all at once. As obviously stupid as that is, the homing missiles also make your homing missiles less effective. This could help at times, but if you're trying to prioritize the source of the missiles, well, sorry bud, they're in your red rectangle, they're gonna get it. It almost acts as a shield, or a type of anti-air defense when you really think about it. How crafty of those primers to thwart our missile launcher weapons with their own missile launcher weapons. When it comes to the levels, the environments themselves, there's a lot to talk about. There's plenty of new areas, such as the rice fields, industrial power plants, and a different visual theme to the cities. The weather effects, like snow, rain, sandstorms, and so on, in addition to some missions taking place in the middle of the night, go a long way in keeping things varied. The Industrial District nighttime level is one of my favorites. They have such a unique, almost tranquil vibe to them, and the gameplay on offer matches that mood. You usually start out undetected, giving you and your squad ample time to scope out the place, coordinate an attack, and choose when the battle starts. Everything here is the mission. The enemies you see are what you'll encounter, so that pre-combat phase is important. Even cooler, you can utilize the very tall stairwells to your advantage, either walking all the way up with your puny legs as an air raider or ranger, or fly up there lickety-split with a wing diver. As much as I'm praising the gameplay portion, I will admit a lot of my love for this area has to do with the nighttime setting itself. I know how silly it must sound, getting excited at the idea of nighttime levels and rain or snow effects for a PS4-era game, but EDF is so good in its own way, it not reaching the graphical standards of the time is what's expected. It might not look like a AAA budgeted game by any means, but it never needed to. That said though, to see it take a few steps towards the modern day with its visuals, both with the enemies and environments, oh man, it makes me so proud. I can absolutely admit that the efforts to improve the visuals were worth it for me, but it hits home specifically because it's the cherry on top of an already excellent experience. Knowing how great the gameplay is at its heart, it's easier to appreciate the surprises as they happen. I certainly remember my excitement at seeing the snow level for the first time. Another point in the game's favor when it comes to the weather effects, like rain or sandstorms and such, is that these don't feel like concessions to appease modern gamers, but ways to make the core game better, much like the aliens and frog humans. With each mainline entry, there's been an increasing number of missions, even excluding the DLC, and with more variables at their disposal to mix into each level, it keeps the game from getting stale, or at least staves it off a bit longer. Sure, you fought drones, but have you fought them in the industrial area? In a snowy city? Yeah, I thought so. The cave levels are of course a mainstay in the series, but it is kind of sad that the pitch black versions didn't make a comeback from 4.1. Again, like I said in the 4.1 video though, maybe that makes that game worth going back to, among other reasons, which is a positive in the long run. My favorite tunnel environments, however, almost entirely make up for that fact. The tutorial level and mission number 1 start off in the EDF base before we even know aliens are invading yet. Just an ordinary day, and our characters are average citizens who are only there to be of extra help before the EDF base opens up the next day. Long story short, ants make their appearance, we fight our way to the surface, fend off bugs for a couple levels afterwards, then flee somewhere else once we see all the massive teleportation anchors land all around us. Much later on in the game, 70 missions later or so, we make a return visit to the EDF base to reclaim it so we can retrieve our giant Rock'em Sock'em robot boy. We take down those teleportation anchors we fled from, among many other threats crowding the entrance, before venturing back down those tunnels we escaped from all those months ago. Although it's practically a palette swap of the underground terrain we've come to expect, simply trading bug-made tunnels with human-made ones, rough and natural rock for smooth and clinical metal, these levels feel so different and cool. It's dark, with most of the lights coming from our soldiers' flashlights and weapons, and the pacing is a mix of getting ambushed while walking around, and opening doors and ambushing the aliens in a large open arena of sorts. Again, these environments aren't something I would have likely asked for when coming straight off of 4.1, but they're fantastic, and this is one of the more memorable moments in the entire campaign. I especially love the idea that this is one big operation that takes place during many levels in a row, Stage 1, Stage 2, Stage 3, and Retreat, and that this is already building off of the opening hour of the game, us returning to that tutorial area. Afterwards, we then use what we came back for, to strike down a bunch of aliens and monsters on the surface. Then in the very next level, it's the answer to finally taking down Archelaus. These miniature arcs are some of the best parts of the game. More often, you're left to take out some alien force that's gathered in a new area for the sake of varying up the mission structure and map layout. You kind of hop from place to place, and the dialogue within each level is the crutch that carries the story and progression forward. I have no problems with that style at all, naturally, but I can't pretend something in me doesn't get a little excited when seeing that the next mission is part 1 of something. The best way I can describe it is like the multi-part stories in a cartoon show. Sure, most of the episodes in the series are one-offs, which is what you expect and are content with, but now and again there's a more ambitious arc that requires more time, more episodes. Those ones stick out, and I'm sure we all have fond memories of whichever cartoon or TV show from our past that included them now and then. It's yet another way to change up the pace, which is ironic, as really the game is slowing things down in a sense, if anything. An objective increase in variety would definitely have you jumping from a snowy city to an underground tunnel to a valley to an industrial district at night. But in the grand scheme, there being a handful of similar environments in a row, all part of the same self-contained mini-story, paces out the long mission count even better than the alternative, varying up things on a deeper, more significant level. Another favorite of mine is the introduction to the non-human, supposedly, alien infantry. We fight them off as best we can, all while most of our troops and NPCs are dying left and right, and eventually the mission ends as the commander orders us to retreat. Our soldiers say it's no use, there's no escape, and they opt to hide out and wait for backup, but we return to the menu. The very next mission we're in that same place, hiding out with the other stragglers in a parking garage. Here you can even see the aliens walking about, patrolling, searching for you. Again, it's up to you to leave the area and coordinate your attack. Such a cool moment, even if it doesn't really add up when you think about it long enough. Even when it isn't as obvious as that, the dialogue can play a big role in connecting together some of the non-multi-phase missions, making them feel natural and continuous, even though they aren't specifically numbered and separated from the rest. The descriptions beforehand can play a part too, but those aren't quite as effective given that you have to read a bunch of flavor text when other players might be waiting for you to ready up. Still a nice inclusion though. The best example of all this is the opening 10 or so levels. These take place prior to us even becoming real EDF soldiers. We're still citizens who were given a specific job at the EDF facility in anticipation to the base being open to the public, which is why we're dressed all weird, and the NPCs treat us like toddlers who just learned how to use a gun or call down an airstrike.
And you have access to military radio systems, too. Somebody must be putting a lot of trust in you.
An order? From a civilian?
The premise in all of these opening levels is that the commander and real EDF soldiers are trying to escort us to safety.
Sergeant, take the civilians to a safe place.
This time I will definitely take you to a safe place.
But we keep getting ambushed on the way, and we're forced to get involved and help out. Every single time, the sergeant promises us that now we'll be taken to safety.
This time I will definitely take you to a safe place. I'll take you to a safe place, this time for sure.
But instead, we keep running into new enemy types. Something that I'm enjoying more and more as the series goes on is seeing our EDF army's first attempts at taking down a threat they haven't encountered before. Remember in 4.1 with the Requiem gun?
Didn't do shit, sir! Fall back!
And the many other times our NPCs were flabbergasted that our efforts were in vain? Well, a similarly funny moment takes place early on in EDF 5, and it's fucking amazing.
Commencing air raid. This is Skybat. Commence attack.
Me? I was a cook before I enlisted.
Is that how it is?
I'm a natural born soldier.
Too late, too late.
Follow me!
You think you can beat us with those weapons? This was too easy. Try dodging that, dumbass!
The music that goes along with it is extra cheeky, the victory score playing for a long time during the first attempt until it's obvious it didn't do anything and gets replaced by spooky atmospheric music once more.
No damage?
They didn't dodge because there's no need.
I can't go on a trip. That's over the top.
On the second attempt, it's even quicker and more abrupt.
Fire!
Weapons are checked.
Stay alive!
Prepare for battle!
Sir, yes, sir!
It's not working at all.
It's about time.
What is the secret behind that golden armor?
I'm ready. Is there nothing we can do about those aliens?
The chatter from the soldiers in your squad in these opening stages is delightful too. They seem to be trying to convince you to enlist in the EDF, and they talk about how fabulous the army is, and so on.
Just sign up and join us. The EDF could use someone like you.
We welcome you with open arms.
Being a soldier is awesome.
This is the best job ever. As long as there are no monsters.
Have you made up your mind to become a soldier?
Being a soldier is awesome.
You'll receive a pension.
You don't need to worry about your life after retirement.
Much like how the beginning level contrasts hilariously with the final boss in the game, which I'll get to, these soldiers' naive and upbeat attitude about their occupation is adorable, all things considered. After 12 or so missions, a comically pointless time skip happens, which I'll talk about later, and now that 4 months have passed, we're officially members of the Earth Defense Force. It's nice. All of this introductory stuff was handled in a very tongue-in-cheek but entertaining way. The sound design overall hits the mark of what you'd want to see, or hear, I guess, in an EDF game, both for the voice lines and the music. Even more than in previous entries, there's a stronger sci-fi feel to some of the tracks, especially in the beginning with the drones that resemble classic UFO designs. It's amazing this style wasn't used before. It fits in well already, given that it sounds like something you'd hear from a low-budget alien invasion film of the past, but even better, those always sounded kinda goofy in their own right, which is why it's a perfect 1-2 combo for EDF 5. My friend would kill me if I didn't specifically point out how great the song is for when you're searching for a lobby. It starts off with a weird robot meat morphing sound effect, then hits hard with the start of the instrument introduction, but my favorite part is how much it works itself up in a frenzy, going absolutely bananas with its epic cadence and bombastic chords for literally nothing. Again, this song is just for the goddamn menu screen. Incredible. I particularly love the mission select screen myself. It's got this groovy jam it falls into, trotting on at a comfortable rhythm, one both exciting and relaxing at the same time. It's hard to pin down. On one hand, I get inspired, proud to venture into another war zone, protecting Mother Earth from any alien attack, but on the other, it's just a really smooth instrumental, one that I find myself nodding along to, causing me to question whether I should really ready up or not, resisting the urge to jump into froggy humanoid combat with a press of a button, simply because I want to keep listening to the song. Oh man, it's great. The climactic and tense soundtrack slams into you hard when in hectic battles or when the enemy reveals a trap card. And the score for when the tides turn, and the EDF starts to win the day or power through the struggle and begin encroaching on victory, is out of this world invigorating. It's small, but I also quite like the music that plays when you finish a mission. To think in EDF 2017 there wasn't anything at all. And now we have this. Ah, just lovely. The voice lines are what you might expect if you played other games in the mainline series, or even if you've seen my videos on them. They're exactly what I'd hoped for, a brand new set of lines, all mostly hitting that iconic mix of desperation, seriousness, determination, and silliness that I've come to expect and love. I won't spend a whole lot of time on them here though, as I've no doubt already sprinkled a couple of them in here now and then when they fit best. There's only a few specific bits I want to draw attention to right now: the death screams, the new song for our soldiers to sing, and a hilarious one-off line that springs up far more often than you'd think. I'm pretty sure this voice clip showed up in 4.1 now and then, but holy moly, do these soldiers like giving you a specific compliment. That one being,
You're good! You're good! You're good!
You're good!
You're good!
You're good! You're good! You're good! You're good!
Clean hit!
You're good!
Amazing!
You're good!
We took out the enemy! Bullseye!
You're good!
Awesome!
You're good!
You're good!
You're good!
I have a funny anecdote about this line, how it seeped into my brain so hard that I began hearing it when a certain Burger King commercial would play.
Have it your way.
You're good!
Much like how I talked about in the EDF 2017 video, these soldiers absolutely love pressing their walkie-talkie buttons and letting everyone hear their final moments. It never gets old. You're in combat, things are getting heated, a ksh sound effect plays, and then...
This is Bull Leader. It's too late. Hang in there.
Seriously, forget zodiac signs or spirit animals. I want to know your death scream. Here's mine.
What's your guttural, like, death scream in Earth Defense Force? That's mine.
If I had to spell it out, I think it would look like that. Let me know how you'd spell your EDF death scream. Anyway, the jingle that you can sing and get your squad mates to respond to makes a return, but completely revamped in cadence and tone.
Oh, we are the valiant infantry. We are the alpha team with passion and camaraderie.
Hear us as we shout at the top of our lungs. Be calm, be bold, and raise your guns. It's only with our sacrifice that mankind can still exist down here in paradise. To defend our dearest Mother Earth, we're ready to give up our lives. High up in the air, our comrades fight, dashing through the sky now like a million bolts of light. We shall spread our wings wide and fly high, soaring, gliding through the endless sky. Now pick up our weapons, off we go, firing at the flying saucers, shooting down our foe. We shall not allow these aliens to rule, we homo sapiens.
Much like with 4.1, there are more verses in the game than you're given the ability to sing on command, and with 111 missions, and how difficult it can be to hear faraway squad mates this time around, it's really tough to find all of them. There's a YouTube video that has them all, like before, but I'm not going to play all of them for you in this video like I did in the last one. Because this one is more sing-songy, it makes it all the funnier when squad mates sing them when alone. A few of their voices are pleasant, but others... well, let's just say I'm sure they prefer when there's a choir to blend in with.
Dearest Mother Earth, we're ready to give up our lives.
Honestly, they're trying their best, no shame. As far as the voice lines on the whole, even though I've already spliced in so many that I like, some could argue I went overboard with it even, there's quite literally 10 times as many as this, if not more, that are just as funny and memorable. It's simply impossible to fit all of it in, especially given that I wouldn't have much to say about them other than, isn't this funny? That said, I'll throw in a couple more and say that afterwards, and we can call it a day for this section.
That thing can fly?
Their technology is on a completely different level.
I say what we lack in technology, we make up in bravery.
The enemies are hiding in the shadows of buildings. Those bastards! Move in!
The monsters are taking orders from the aliens!
Dreadful beastmasters!
I have to say, there's so many of them. I feel like I'm Napoleon Bonaparte.
Like his victory in the Battle of Austerlitz.
Cannons! Those flying things have cannons!
Isn't this funny? Items are fun to collect. I like grabbing items. Items give us stuff we want, like armor and good weapons.
It's true.
Before getting to the classes, there's a whole host of gameplay changes to get to first. When you fail a level, depending on the difficulty you selected, you'll now keep a portion of the items you collected. Normal is 75%, hardest is 25%, and etc. This feels like a standard quality of life improvement, and it's one that I can get behind. As a contrast, I don't think I'd appreciate an auto-collect mechanic of sorts, where the game simply collects every item without your involvement at the end of every mission, and I have first-hand experience with that, since some players like to ruin others' fun by joining lobbies and using their cheats to benefit everyone else. A lot of the community seems to really not like the collecting items part of the gameplay, but I've gone to bat for it already in previous videos and will stand by it. It's part of the Earth Defense Force gameplay loop that I enjoy, and the act of grabbing each individual item is satisfying enough to stay engaging. That said, I can admit that some levels feel arbitrarily quick to end, which makes it pretty frustrating to see all those boxes you missed out on fade into the ether, and for some reason, there's still the annoying issue where item boxes that fall into the water are basically entirely inaccessible. But even still, I don't think auto-collecting is the answer. Keeping a percentage of what you already collected on death simply eases the frustration of getting team-wiped when you've just spent 20 minutes in the level already. It doesn't make one half of the game redundant in the process. For me, the added equipment and other updates, which I'll talk about soon, in addition to the game still granting you items if you failed on non-Inferno difficulties, makes the whole thing more palatable than the prior games while still retaining that quirky charm from those early entries. In fact, I could easily see how Sandlot could extend even further into the item side of things, but I'll save that for my discussion about the aerator. A bonus to this quality of life nicety is how it could very well help you with the level you're currently stuck on, as you might obtain a new weapon, or even an upgrade that helps you finally get through it. That's one of the biggest changes with the overall gameplay, the addition of more leveling, this time with the individual stats of your weapons. Basically, if you collect a weapon crate and it's a duplicate, something you already own, it'll get upgraded instead of being worthless. That's the idea anyway, even if it's not completely accurate. So instead of looking at a bunch of stuff you already own, hoping for a shiny new toy to play with, as was in 2017 and 4.1, now you might see a lot of green up labels instead, and going down the pop-up boxes will show you how each gun improved. It seems that everything has a star value, so 0 stars means it's at the lowest level, and the star being filled in means that's the maximum value for that stat. If everything is all the way up, the weapon itself will get a star next to it in the selection screen. Sometimes the star number increasing doesn't actually do anything to the gun itself, much like when your accuracy improves from a B- to a B-, for instance, but for the most part, almost every time a green up is displayed, the weapon gets better in some way. After a while, you may notice that higher-starred, lower-level weapons can sometimes be better than the base variants of the new weapon you just acquired, even if they're similar in category and even name. Personally, I like this upgrading system, but I am hesitant towards its inclusion. I don't usually enjoy numbers infesting every inch of the games I like, but I do think it works well here, since there are so many missions in this game, and if you're one to play through multiple difficulties and put hundreds of hours into EDF, this extends the feeling of progression even further without it getting stretched too thin. I do wish there was a way to compare the old stats with the newer ones after this pop-up screen goes away, since the weapon selection screen doesn't really convey how much better something got, and if you had 8 things to close out of, you may have already forgotten which one had the starkest improvement. Even more, while the new label stays over the weapons you haven't used as of yet, the up label gets removed after you play the next mission, regardless if you used it or not. You only have a couple weapon slots to go with, so you can't possibly test everything the next time out, so it's easy to forget which ones deserve another try. That is one of the reasons this new system won me over, though. It gives new life to a lot of your arsenal, maybe some you had previously written off before for having a serious flaw or lack of damage or something. Oh, an old wingdiver weapon now doesn't take nearly as much energy to recharge and reloads quicker? Maybe it's worth it now. The range for a missile launcher is dramatically increased, the accuracy for a gun is finally above G. Let's take a look, it might be a sleeper contender for your new favorite weapon. These shifts happen sometimes, and it's always fun when your perspective on something you thought was trash before flips in an instant. Your tone changes from derogatory and insulting to loving and apologetic. It's like an abusive relationship, except... I got nothing. Sorry, my joke writers are out on strike right now. Some people aren't in favor of this change, as some weapons are almost useless at their base value compared to when they're maxed out, and it's basically impossible to try to upgrade a specific gun, so if you're obsessing and clamoring for one weapon in particular to get better, Well, tough luck, the RNG gods might not smile down on you. I'm not interested in looking under the hood on this game. There have been many spreadsheets and docs shared around about the unlocks for guns and upgrades and so on and so forth, but from what I can gather as an outsider looking in, it's not as clear-cut as many people would like it to be. One last update I'll talk about that relates to all of the classes is how the items get doled out. In 2017, this wasn't an issue, there was only one type of soldier, but in 4.1, you only ever unlocked armor and weapons for the class you were playing as. Now, it sort of functions like XP share in Pokemon and other RPGs, where the other members of your party who aren't in battle get some of the rewards. The ratio definitely favors the unit you're playing as, which the armor values reflect, and the same goes for the quantity of weapons given at the end too. Even still, this helps alleviate the problem certain players might face, where they want to switch around and try everyone out, but didn't want to start from scratch and go through normal or what have you all over again, or fall too behind where their teammates were. This kind of relates to a small change with the medals, in that now, clearing normal or hard will retroactively give you the medals for the prior difficulties. Hardest and Inferno are only unlocked after finishing the game once through, and are separate from the rest. Clearing hardest won't cause any other medals to get added to your list, it's only hardest. With all this in mind, it seems like Sandlot were attempting to get players up to speed quicker, shortening the time to advance to higher difficulties even if you're experimenting with classes. Not a horrible consideration, since Hardest and Inferno are where the more challenging mutated varieties come out to play, like Dark Red, Silver, and Gold. Or maybe it was to compensate for the absurd quantity of missions this time around. Perhaps 111 was too many for even them to feel comfortable with without throwing the players a bone. Again, we could call this a quality of life update, and this one particularly seems like it should appeal to everyone, but I do have one quibble about it all. As much fun as it is to upgrade your guns and unlock and experiment with new ones as you progress through the levels, you can't get back that starting from square one sensation with the classes you XP shared with. What I mean is, when you do finally decide to start tinkering around with other units, you're clobbered in the head with choice. If you're starting over on normal or hard when online, thankfully the weapon limits will thin it down a little, but it's still not a one-to-one reenactment. You have a lot of upgraded weapons already. There goes some of the fun if you like seeing your weapons slowly get better, and you literally can't get that feeling back unless you start a new profile. Even more though, if you didn't want to start over, and instead chose to go with hardest, or decided to try out a new class in the middle of the game, or even started it up yourself in offline mode for the first time, you'll be assaulted with dozens of things you haven't tried yet, and you're obviously going to select the highest ranked ones anyway, which means you'll miss out on the fun of seeing everything for what it is. Who knows if any of them are good right now, could be good in the future, what they're best at in combat, and so on. This might sound nuts, but I actually yearned for a weapon and armor limit option for offline mode. How on earth would I know what level of gear missions are tuned around without checking online mode or referencing Google? I'm not saying I would have wanted to stick rigidly to that limit, but it'd be nice to know if weapons are actually good, or if the difficulty and mission combination are simply too easy for your current equipment, as you're able to mow everything down without hassle. For me, all of this really impacted how I approached the Air Raider specifically. They get 3 weapon slots and a vehicle choice, and they're a class that doesn't really work when testing out alone, so much of their equipment is situational or built around utility. This means if you leave the Air Raider as your last class to try, there's just so much here, it's overwhelming, and knowing how specific of situations a few of these show their worth in, it's tough to know when to try them. After all, if you tested one of your many new options out in a less than ideal condition, you might write it off prematurely and try something else. There's so much here to browse through. As that's happening, you'll basically look like a fucking idiot, providing almost no help to your online teammates. Sorry guys, I didn't know which weapons are good or ideal for certain missions, but I also don't want you to tell me which ones are good. I want to test it out for myself, and wow, yeah, I'm a horrible teammate right now. I'm so sorry. This is the main drawback for me with all of these weapon choices, upgrades, and classes, and so on. Even when you do try most of them out, it's tough to keep all of this in mind when you're trying to get the most out of the game. When you do find something reliable, you might forget about it after a long bout of not playing or choosing a different class for a while. The weapon names all blur together at times. Maybe a way to favorite a few of these weapons for each class would help, something you can always turn to when having a tough go with a mission. At this point, I'm completely comfortable not even touching the Air Raider, even though I know how fun they can be at their best. Others are more than comfortable with them, and that's awesome. I'll stick to the more direct approach with the Wing Divers, Rangers, and Fencers.
Shoot. I missed one.
I hit a tree. That little bastard got lucky. I'm in a tank, by the way. I'm not sure if you saw.
Saw that. Very cool.
Very cool. Ow, that's not as smart. You see this? Is it like lips? That can't be smart for tanks. You see this? Stop running into me, you dick! You keep running into me. Look at that! Did you see that?
I flip you?
Yeah, you did a kickflip on me.
The classes all have some new quirks to them, as well as updated mechanics with a few of their guns. First off, there's a new slot available to fencers, rangers, and wing divers called Equipment. Rangers and wing divers can equip 1, and fencers can equip 2. With rangers, that slot can be filled with different armors that buff your speed and pickup range, or nerf knockback and slowdown. Remember when I talked about those pill bugs being a huge hassle? Well, with the ranger, if you knew which level you were in, having on the explosion-proof shirt that negates the knockdown effect could save you from falling off a high platform on a cave, or just allow you to keep firing at them as a whole instead of wasting time on the ground. The one that mitigates slowdown is also helpful depending on the level, I'd say for certain alien infantry especially, like the fucking red frogs and their crazy shotguns. The rangers can sprint now, opposed to being forced to roll to gain more speed, but I won't lie, I really hate the sprinting function. It zooms in the camera so you can barely see anything, it doesn't feel very fast at base speed, you have to awkwardly keep holding the control stick down super hard, if you lighten up the pressure at all, he stops, and when you stop, either on purpose or not, there's a deceleration animation you're locked into where you can't do anything. Not a fan, I'll keep my roll, thanks. Even still, it is nice that your item acquisition range extends in a big obvious circle, and many of the armors you can equip make the sprinting better, such as going faster, making the acceleration quicker, allowing you to plow through obstacles, and so on. I quite fancy the armor that grants a straight-up increase in item pickup range, like the 200, 400, and 600% ones, which slaps a huge white circle around you as you go. It's great when you're in a bind and in need of a healing item fast, but maybe not so much when you're trying to be selective with your crate pickups. In 4.1, the Ranger, and only the Ranger, was able to heal any AI soldiers under their command with every health pickup. That's been extended to all classes in EDF5. As a wing diver or fencer, you can replenish your squad's HP by grabbing healing items too. Seemingly to compensate for that fact, some support equipment for the Ranger boosts the amount that their NPC allies are healed. This is really the best of both worlds. The Ranger keeps one of its exclusive class traits, and now no one has to pout about not being able to do anything to keep their AI squad mates in one piece. Considering the Ranger also gets the health replenishing guns, oh man, this is such a great gimmick. The NPC soldiers can really make the difference in battle. If you're stuck on a difficult mission and have allies, it's greatly to your benefit to keep them alive. Not only do they serve as distractions, which is invaluable full stop, but they genuinely do make a difference in thinning the horde. There's plenty of examples, but if I had to pick one where this healing style of play really helped us out, it was with the Hive level, where multiple Death Queens and Anchors spawn in. Making sure our soldiers could protect those exoskeletons was crucial to our success. The Ranger also gets a few vehicles this time around that slide into that equipment slot, some lowly tanks, helicopters, and bikes. Given that the Ranger was the other unit that could pilot these machines, it makes sense to give them some of the less impressive aerator stuff from 4.1. There's an added benefit to all of this, as it means some of the junk from the aerator gets cleared out a little. Maybe as a Ranger you might pick a bike, but as an aerator, it just didn't make much sense with all the other cool shit at your disposal. The bike itself is particularly fun, though, at least for its comedy value. The physics on this thing are nuts. It flips over so easily, and it's wild. It is entertaining, but I must admit, I rarely choose it. I just don't see its practicality in most missions. With the Ranger's weapons, there's a lot of assault rifles that are now semi-automatic, meaning you'll need to pull the trigger for every shot of the gun. I didn't expect to see these at all, but I didn't mind them, and at a certain point, one of them was my tried-and-true companion for a dozen or so missions. The other notable addition is the laser sight on some of the guns. This goes for all of the classes, depending on the weapon of course, but I'll talk about it right now with the Ranger. You'll always have the target reticle, but with the laser, it only appears on enemies and objects that are in range. This is a nice gauge, something to reference when you have a short to medium range weapon, and don't want to waste bullets without being sure you'll hit your target. Laser sights also just feel great to use. I don't think there's a single game where they're included that I didn't enjoy them to some extent. Besides the semi-automatic rifles, there's another unique entry that stood out to me. The Minion Busters are types of guns that have a 1-2 punch effect. They shoot out like normal auto rifles in a spray fashion, but then the bullets latch onto the target and explode. It's neat. The description says it's great for dealing with armored enemies, and I'd agree, but I also find it enjoyable even when on the regular ants. It has a good kick to it, can stun lock pretty well, which is helpful against those horrid red frogs, and has a nice visual effect. While the missile launchers still aren't as powerful and cheesy as they were in 2017, with the right equipment, they become a bit more viable for combat. Some of the Ranger's equipment relates to the homing range and lock-on time. Sometimes it allows for multiple lock-ons on the same target. This is nice. I specifically remember having a grand old time with the Prominence now that I could fire it faster and at a longer range. The MLRA was a decent pick for some B-levels, too. I'm also delighted that the Air Tortoise is still a thing. I fucking love this slow-moving missile launcher, and with the increased lock-on speed, oh yeah, baby.
Target confirmed.
Oh my god. I shot off 2 legs and an arm, and you decide, you know what? Rain death from above. There's also the Ibis guided rocket launcher, where you fire out some rockets and aim at where you want them to hit, and they'll lock on like an airstrike. Super cool stuff. If you couldn't tell, the Ranger is my second in command. I quite fancy their simple movement mechanics and their plethora of shotguns, rocket launchers, and missiles. A specific change coming from 4.1 to 5, one that mostly affects the Ranger, is that being able to equip 2 of the same weapon is now exclusive to the Fencer. You can't double up as a Ranger, Wing Diver, or Air Raider. Maybe there were some specific edge cases where a class could dominate by doubling up, but the worst defender I saw was equipping 2 Lysanders and switching back and forth, and it didn't feel like a crazy overpowered play, just a smart workaround to the limitations on offer. My most charitable take on this is Sandlot knew how many freaking weapons existed in this game, and this was their way of shouting, please give the other ones a shot. I just shredded that guy's intestines. You son of a bitch! Get back here, little shit. Get back here. Are you scared? Get back here. It's just you and me. Oh, it's the— You're scared, you little fucker! I just killed him.
Did good.
Gonna wait till my energy comes back, 'cause now nothing is a threat on this map. The Wing Diver's equipment was so much fun to see when first trying out the game. I know I keep saying this, but really, as much as I cherished the Wing Diver unit, it didn't really dawn on me that more equipment that messed with your fuel levels and flight could be a thing in the first place, let alone that Sandlot would go that route. Basically, energy cores have stats that determine how fast your energy refills normally, how fast the emergency refill speed is, its maximum fuel capacity, and so on. It is cool, absolutely, but I will say that with her, compared to the other classes, it feels the most like a tertiary level up bar. The higher you go, naturally the better stuff you'll find, ones that come with far higher energy tank numbers and faster recharges. Those faster recharges don't feel quite as special to see, since they're essentially necessary given the higher maximum energy. The bar at the bottom right stays the same size on screen, just the numbers change, so if the reload speed didn't get upped significantly, oh man, would equipping a 300 plus tank suck. Thankfully, some are more obviously gimmicked, ideal for certain situations and fighting styles. Faster reloads for guns, better aerial movement, be it speed or efficiency with the fuel itself, and even the exact opposite, where you can't fly basically at all, you hover a foot or so before falling, but your tank is utterly massive. Considering certain weapon charges can literally take a tank and a half of your charge depending on your loadout, yeah, this can definitely be a worthwhile choice. In fact, on the hardest difficulty, in the dreaded red drone level, it was the silver bullet. Sure, I can't fly worth shit, but that doesn't matter. Now I have enough energy to fully load a shot for the Raijin without going bankrupt right away. I was able to chill out on the ground behind my buddy's shields, Air Raider utility for the win by the way, and let the big tank and Raijin combo do its job. Fantastic. This is the best feeling in EDF, strategizing and experimenting with weapon loadout choices to find that perfect fit for the situation. Much like with the Ranger, the Wing Diver has a new trick to her movement. Clicking the stick makes her dash, either forward to maintain height and get a decent velocity increase, or a flip dodge to the side or backwards. It definitely comes in handy when trying to avoid a charging Erginus or Arculus, sidestep spider wire and acid, duck behind cover quickly, or just be an efficient use of your fuel as you avoid enemy fire and go after a downed ally to revive them. Every class has some degree of increased item acquisition range. Ranger it plops on as they sprint. Fencer, the circle shows up at the start and end of a dash or booster jump. All vehicles have it, which helps the Air Raider and Ranger, and for the Wing Divers, the radius activates when boosting. I don't think I talked about it too much in the previous video, but I really found myself taking advantage of the bunny hop method with the Wing Diver when in critical situations this time. For instance, when my friend and I were toughing it out on hardest and he would go down, I'd bunny hop all the way to one side of the map to lure the enemies away in a safe manner, hold the left trigger until you get high enough, float back down and repeat, which actually nets you more fuel in the long run, and skate all around the map until I picked him up with 0 enemies nearby. Maybe I'm biased, but holy hell man, the wing diver is so good. Even just dashing in midair to maintain speed, you can eke out a net energy gain. Oh, so great. In fact, the dashing overall makes this kiting strategy so effective, even on Inferno with the full lobby of randos. When returning to 4.1 to record some footage, it was hard to get used to not being able to dash around in midair. It opened my eyes, though, to just how much the dashing improves the wing diver's survivability and deadliness. For offense, being able to stay afloat at the same height, thanks to a dodge left or right, makes continuous aerial combat so much more viable. For defense, I was wondering why spiders this time didn't seem as threatening as the black and gold ants, or flying bees of any color, but in hindsight, the answer is obvious. The dash makes all the difference. In 4.1, welp, I got hit in the air, that's gonna slow me down and prevent me from making any lateral movements to get free. In 5, though, I likely won't even get hit in the first place with this quickness at my disposal, but if I do, I can easily jut to the left or right to get clear of the spider wire. The bees are terrifying, though, I'll give them that. They can actually keep up with me when I try to run away. They're relentless. I apologize to the wing diver NPCs I slandered in the 4.1 video. Okay, I get it now. These guys are scary. I mean, you still shouldn't fly into the Retarius webs, but whatever. The main thing to be wary of when on anything higher than normal is landing on the ground by accident. A dodge to the side while midair clears a lot of distance and you keep your momentum. If you scrape the soil when you aren't expecting it, however, you'll do a grounded dodge and most likely die. It's genuinely terrifying when I land by mistake, as I now have to check if I have enough time and fuel to lift off and start boosting again. Truly, the life as a wing diver main is rough. I'm just kidding, they're fucking amazing. With the weapons, there's some pretty big changes to the wing diver's arsenal. Whereas in 4.1, everything was either a full reload into the gun, which was separate from the tank, or a single shot straight from the tank with every pull of the trigger. Now, a large percentage of your loadout choices behave very differently. Essentially, certain guns need to be charged up beforehand this time. You press and hold the trigger, feeding your fuel into the gun, then release the trigger and it fires all at once. Some of them, like the Raijin I mentioned earlier, act as a single shot. If it isn't charged all the way, it's less direct, more spread out, and less damaging overall, which is why that one is a pain to use with smaller energy cores. Although it may look like a nuisance from one point of view, when taking into account how EDF5 plays moment to moment, these guns start to make a lot more sense. Like I said earlier, there's a lot more room in this game for planning your attacks before the enemy even knows you're there. Preloading it, even if it takes a tank and a half or even 2, means you can have a full shot ready and a full tank for after the shot connects. This gives you more room to keep on the pressure, since you can swap over to a different gun and go bananas, as well as fly around to your heart's delight. In 4.1, firing a similarly strong sniper would mean a few emergency reloads after the fact where you're mostly defenseless. With other guns, it's the same premise, but a different result. When charging up all the way, some of their firing states go on for a ludicrous amount of time, shooting out sometimes hundreds of bullets before they're empty. Initially, it really got on my nerves that you couldn't do anything once you released the trigger. You had to wait it out until it was done with, and hope no allies got in your way. Well, thankfully you can press the reload button or dash to stop it from firing, but you certainly don't get any of that energy back, you just waste it from cutting it off early. There's one more gimmick to a handful of these charge-up types. Many lasers and other mid-range weapons deal far more damage and are more accurate in the first quarter of their tanks, then at the halfway point they get less concentrated and more haphazard with their arcs, or their laser gets smaller and thinner. The final quarter of the ammunition is basically completely worthless. The lasers will be microscopic compared to their beefy thickness at the start, meaning their damage is a fraction of what they dealt initially, and with the lightning varieties, their spread just gets so wide it's almost pointless to keep going without reloading again. I've seen arguments online that this encourages more strategic use of your fuel levels, essentially optimizing it to its fullest by only charging up how much you need, reloading at the right times, and so on, but I don't know. It almost feels deceiving, since the numbers on the weapon select screen don't really represent what you'll be seeing out in the field. The EDF series really needs something akin to a testing space between levels. For instance, in Splatoon 3, you can swim around and use your equipped guns in a loading screen safe space, and in Rivals of Aether, you can click a button and start dash dancing and punching the air. If I could see what a new weapon behaved like, maybe I'd be better prepared for the next mission. The descriptions are hilarious, given their girth and needless gassing up of every weapon the EDF felt the need to create. Like, Take a look at this grenade for the Ranger, for instance. It was in a box labeled Danger, and it's a throwable grenade that jumps to a comically large size once it's out of your hand. Amazing. This is all fun in the lore sense, but until you become familiar with what every single one of these guns is called and what they do, you're almost guaranteed to pick something that you thought was good, and then realize, oh right, this gun becomes flaccid in a heartbeat and is utterly pathetic after 3 seconds. Awesome. The short-range charge-up varieties are where my interests mostly lie. The rapier-styled phalanxes, where a full charge is a full rapier shot, but doled out in a lightning-quick fashion, and the lances. Oh lord, the triple lance carried me through so much of Hardest, and even some Inferno missions, and the Dragoon Lance's one-shot potential is awe-inspiring. Speaking of dialogue, have you seen Star Wars before?
One time.
What a good movie. The Destroyer Blaster is similar to the charge-up types I just mentioned, but handled a little differently. It has the idiosyncrasy with its power that I mentioned earlier, where it starts off as an exterminator of hopes and dreams, then becomes increasingly less sassy as you run down its ammo, but this one though you don't pre-charge, it just has an ammo count that you can reload at any time. As a side note, the rumble on the controller for this bad boy, like, fuck, if you're in need of a vibrator for a night, equip this guy and start blasting. Anyway, it is incredibly powerful, as are some of the other kinetic mid-range weapons with the same gimmick, but it does feel kinda shitty to have to reload when you're nearing halfway, or even earlier. It's another example of when the stats just feel like they're lying to you. Yeah, it has that many shots per clip before it empties, which sounds fair enough given how much energy it costs, but when factoring in that you'll be reloading twice, if not 3 times as often as usual, it's a lot less alluring. It's tough to firmly say if this new way of charging and firing her weapons is better or worse than how it worked in 4.1. On one hand, it's super cool that there's a very specific wing diver flavor to the variety found in her arsenal, but I won't lie, it's hard to deny the tried and true rapier. Thankfully, that's still an option, among many others, for those who aren't in love with this style. I can appreciate both sides of the coin, and hey, another thing that separates 4.1 from 5. The last thing I wanted to talk about with the wing diver relates to the voice lines. First off, they can now sing like everybody else, which is great. If you remember in 4.1, they, and only they, didn't have any voice work for the EDF song. More interesting, in my opinion anyway, are the NPC voice lines when you're near other wing divers. They sometimes talk about switching to reckless mode, or cruise mode, attack mode.
Switch to reckless mode. Switch to active mode.
Maximize sensor output.
Plasma drive. Output increases.
Weapon system. Unlock.
Like, what are they talking about? Are the English translators trying to pull a fast one here? Why are they alluding to mechanics that aren't in the game? Sure, the ranger units sometimes talk about trying to conserve ammo, which also isn't a thing in the game, but the wing divers talk of mode switching, and other such charging and plasma-related intricacies, has me curious if the translation team is trying to influence Sandlot a little. It sounds like a thing that would make sense with the wing divers, and as we all know, Insect Armageddon did the fencer unit first, so who knows? If some new energy core mode mechanic props up in a future mainline EDF game, I totally called it. Are you feeling a little better now?
I love that.
My accuracy right now is amazing. I have missed every single fucking shot here. Oh my god, he's very elusive.
You're good.
I missed like 8 shots in a row, my guy. 1 shot, 1 kill. Oh, he's still alive. Shut up. 1 shot, 1. Fuck, I missed again. The main difference with the Fencer is the lack of dash canceling and the many equipment options that were added to compensate for it. Being able to dash or booster jump 2, 3, 4 times in a row is a nice concession. I like that there are a few which grant a different extra quantity to each one. If you had a loadout that dealt more with up-close combat, and one that was more reliant on guns, one set could have a dash, and the other could have a booster jump. So combining those movement options into a single slot is nice, and it kind of makes you think of which one should be prioritized for the weapons you have or the mission you're in. Being able to dash more times is always helpful, but the multiple booster jumps can also save your skin in a clutch moment, or just be a perfect way to handle a clump of enemies. It is a shame that you can't stack some of these options, though. For instance, adding in a 2-dash with a 2-3 booster jump won't combine those numbers, you'll only be able to dash twice. Again, maybe this was found to be too overpowered in some builds, but if you implant the mentality into players that they should be experimenting and figuring out the good loadouts, you can't arbitrarily gate them from some of the more obvious stuff they might try out. Some of the other extra equipment slots relate to the shield, and here is where it gets really interesting. 400% durability on a tower shield, plus an increased protection angle, and holy hell, the Fencer finally lives up to the promises its gimmick implied from the very start. Sure, you might still get pushed back when you start firing with your shield up, but goddamn, not having to worry at all about incoming damage for eons feels amazing. Some other shield-influencing equipment reduces pushback, however, so there is a way to circumvent this, but it also consumes your shield at a much faster rate. You do get extra protection though, so it balances out in the end depending on your build. Remember me talking about the weight and chunkiness when aiming as a Fencer in 4.1 with certain weapons? Yeah, there's equipment for that too. Oh baby, I can swing this reticle around so fast. There's also a category that lessens the recoil when firing certain weapons, which really helps boost the usual suspects. Honestly, even though they're my third favorite out of the Wing Diver, Ranger, and Fencer, their equipment was the most fun to experiment with, and in that sense is very in line with this class as a whole. The dual loadouts and the harmony between each weapon arm is a big focus to the Fencer, so adding in active power-ups, the dash cells and boosters which add to your moves when in battle, plus the many passive effects, one that could make up for a flaw or enhance the main strength of your guns and loadouts, is just a blast to mess around with. I only have two major grievances with the Fencer. One is their long delay after shooting certain guns where you can't do anything. I'd love to be able to swap to my other loadout on a whim so I can utilize its dash and flee from the scene ASAP, but you'll have to completely wait for the Fencer to stop his firing and recoil animation before being allowed to move or change weapons. Lame. The other problem relates to the dash ability. Those industrial levels are cool, especially at night, but the fact that you can't dash through the shin-high pipe walls is beyond frustrating. This mech boy can't push through this like every other obstacle in the game? Really? Okay, I'll jump a few feet, then dash, good lord. You also can't roll through it as a ranger, but that seems much more understandable. With the dashing and jumping specifically, it is kind of tedious that you don't have a visual indication on when your jumps or dashes reset. Basically, if you jumped 2 of the 4 times you're able to in succession and you paused before jumping again, you might be able to jump 4 times or only 2 times depending on how much time has passed. It would be nice to know when the full number of actions recharge, so you can better plan for a hectic encounter. The Fencer Air Raider tandem weapons are back, which are at best incredibly powerful and destructive, and at worst, not entirely useful, but still fun to use. The laser guide kit being necessary for certain Fencer homing weapons is, at the very least, an interesting gimmick, but it does kinda suck to have to sacrifice a slot as an Air Raider to open up something for the Fencer. Both varieties are here, the laser guide kit, which forces the Air Raider to keep their aim onto the target they want to hit, which does give them more control, and the more passive, yet less precise, guide beacon gun, where the Air Raider can shoot a dart at wherever they want, like on an Urginus's face, for instance, and I, as a Fencer, can keep blasting away, given that I have a homing weapon with a large enough lock-on box anyway. The normal homing launchers the Fencers have are also enjoyable, and I quite like how they mix with the addition of multiple booster jumps. Lots of buildings in the way, huh? Let me just jump 4 times and... perfect. The last thing I'll point out about the Fencer is you now have the ability to reload your shield whenever you like. Just click the stick, and there we go. Easy quality of life change right there. I think you might kill me here, buddy. I got grabbed, and I'm in your line of fire.
I don't think it does that much damage.
It almost killed
you're
me.
okay.
Oh my god.
They found me. Oh, I'm doing flip me but twisty. Oh god. The motion sickness. Oh my. Oh, we going. Oh, we going. This is the G. What's my trick bonus, GTA? How much money do I make?
The Air Raider has a few changes and updates. Like I said before, 3 weapon slots and a vehicle, but they're the only ones without the extra slot for specific gear. Fair enough, they have a lot to work with as it is, and their normal equipment already has many tools that feel reminiscent to what you'd expect anyway. Needlessly classifying and separating them wouldn't be horrible or anything, but it works as it exists now. There's one idea I had for the Air Raider that I really hope becomes a reality at some point. Again, I enjoy the half of the gameplay loop where you run around and grab item crates, but given that the Air Raider is all about utility, a Roomba-like robot that you can send around to nab boxes for you seems like a great fit. There already are Roombas in the game, after all, be it the homing style, which works fairly well, especially when you're in a cave or trying to flank the enemy behind a building, or the paratroller type, which just flat out don't do anything. The tool is here, now make them seek out crates. Perhaps they can grab 10 of them or something before they expire, or maybe they simply bring them closer to you to avoid grabbing health when you might not want it. I don't know, it just seems like a natural extension to me. The air raider is so focused on the buffs, the decoys, the utility in all areas relating to helping your teammates and the combat side of things, why not do something similar for the other part of the game? Maybe even add in a bouncy trampoline so the ranger can scale a building, giving them a good sniping vantage point. On that note, give the wing diver a core that lets you lift a non-fencer teammate and fly, allowing you to plop your ally down in a high up position, or just carry them to a point of interest. The way the air raider calls down certain bombing runs has been drastically improved. The throwables with the red arc still exist, which still aren't as clear as they could be, but now there's the type that zooms out on the terrain, allowing you to see and properly place where the incoming barrage will hit. You'll still need to work out the timing, having to lead the red danger zone a little bit, but even with that in mind, this is a fantastic improvement. If you use the air raider long enough, or even have one in your party for a decent length of time, you'll start to spot a pretty cool detail. Depending on the type of weapon the air raider requests, you'll be treated to a very distinctive radio personality. To an extent, this was the case in 4.1. I talked about that annoying satellite lady if you recall, but in 5, I found this cast of characters far more enjoyable. There's the artillery unit guy, who occasionally seems proud of his work, but now and then seems disillusioned with this whole alien war thing.
The enemy must have been blown to pieces. Bombing complete. Air raider, still alive? I didn't hit our allies, did I? Let's call it a day. No more requests for today. It's over. I'm gonna eat.
The bombing run guy is a geeky-sounding dweeb who sounds all too eager to be of help, and sometimes gets a little too excited after the run is over.
Confirmed hit at the target site. The hit was accurate. I'll prove to everyone the tactical edge the artillery can give. Attack to the target site is over. Good luck to the ground units. Now you know how strong Phobos is. Now you know how strong Phobos is.
This guy sounds like a dweeb, doesn't he?
He really does.
Now you know how strong Phobos is.
Love can bloom on the battlefield.
But best of all, the Spritefall lady is an eccentric, braggadocious psychopath. She pats herself on the back whenever she can, assuming she really is the inventor of this satellite weapon, and she has a sort of lust for bloodshed, and a lust for the air raider himself at times.
The creator of this weapon must be a genius! Get burned by the fire of hell and die!
You have good taste, air raider. You can launch again if you'd like to.
How can you not love the air raider's assortment of wacky radio personalities? In addition to relying on the point system to dictate when you can call for most airstrikes and vehicles, the request gunships are on a timer, making them effectively normal, albeit sometimes lengthy, reloads. This category of equipment isn't as strong as others, or boasts as large of a radius, but they're balanced around being a safe and reliable go-to. I kind of see these falling into the limpet gun category, but better. It could be your main method of dealing damage during the bouts where you're waiting for your mech or heavy bombing run to refill in points, but what's more, it too is an indirect way of engaging with enemies. Perhaps indirect isn't the key term here, but delayed. Limpet guns shoot, then you press a button, then they explode or create fireworks or whatever. You throw down turrets, then you activate them at the right time, and then they hopefully shred incoming forces. This familiar pattern is present with almost all of the air raider's offensive tools, and this new type is no exception. The reliable, reloadable gunship requests get shot out like a dart, connect with the target, then it fires down rockets or bullets. It works really well, both in terms of gameplay feel, and with how it connects to the core tenets of the air raider as a whole. Beyond the request gunships, there's now the suppression gun, which seems to be the replacement to the spider wire, or at the very least, the wire gun isn't here and this is, and the model of the gun itself looks very similar, so make of that what you will. The suppress gun is essentially a, oh no, I've been grabbed by a tadpole or red ant, I need to free myself weapon. Nothing incredible by any means, but hey, they have an extra weapon slot, and this is probably more useful than the Caesar wire, so there you go. Another thing gone is the wing diver energy recharge tools. I kinda liked being able to help the wing divers, for obvious reasons, so it was a bummer to see that removed. With all the wing diver core shenanigans, I imagine they felt it wasn't as necessary this time. There's one change I'm not sure I fully endorse, but I know I'm not the target audience when it comes to this class, so I'll just explain it and move on. In 4.1, you would, more often than not, spawn in with the vehicle already available to be called down. Some you had to wait until your team killed enough enemies that level, but most of the time, when you loaded in, you could hop into a mech right away. Now, everything needs to be earned from the outset, much like the exceptions in 4.1. I'd have to assume certain missions were designed with this in mind, better thought out and planned around the air raider not dominating with certain vehicles straight from the get-go. If that is the case, I think I get it. Certain tanks, mechs, and so on wreak havoc, it's true, so maybe that initial pseudo-stealth phase would suffer from having a meaty death dealer at the ready so quickly. One major benefit to the anchors replacing the bug nest anthill things is that they're much more visible at a distance, given how high up they are. That's a quality they and the teleportation ships share, naturally, but the key difference is that one necessitates attacks from beneath, and the other can be hit from any direction. This facilitates the air raider considerably, as now they can help rid the play space of spawners by calling in cruise missiles and artillery, or, if you're really feeling stylish, take it head-on in a helicopter. I don't revere the air raider as much as I do the wing diver, nor even the ranger, but fuck man, I can't deny how amazing it feels to meet a pylon at eye level and swat it away with the mounted machine guns. The only thing that made this better was my team of cheerleaders. If you happen to meet up with some wing divers, corralling them into your squad before you get into your chopper, they try their best to match your verticality as you go along. Hearing that all too familiar sound of low fuel levels, it made me laugh, I can't lie. Continuing with the vehicles, it seems you can no longer roll into one like you could in 4.1. A small change, but it could spell disaster for you depending on the severity of the bug infestation surrounding you. What I mean is, before, you could interrupt a roll animation and safely enter a vehicle, but here, you have to wait until you're done with the roll and at a standstill. It's also incredibly unfortunate that if you aren't expecting your vehicle to die at that moment and are still holding down the fire button, you might call down a bombing run or something by accident after it explodes. Also, the issue where a turret could land on an enemy and vanish once their corpse does is also still here, which really fucks you over in tight spots sometimes, as I'm told by my air raider friend.
I threw a turret down, it landed on a drone, and the drone immediately got destroyed. My game plan was to put my turret out and have it not disappear immediately.
That's a bad game plan. What?
I threw out my flame turret when the roly-polies got stuck on it. Now the flamethrower's gone. Unfortunately, when that happens.
The last thing I'll mention about the air raider, one that even an inexperienced kloop-lorp like me could spot, relates to the depth crawler. Given that they can climb onto walls and ceilings, it's far too difficult to maneuver when upside down. A true choke point strat might involve 4 players firing at once towards a small gap in the tunnel, maybe even more with NPCs and turrets, and being able to get out of their line of fire while not hitting them with yours is obviously ideal, and naturally the best spot for you would be on the ceiling. When you finally have the right angle, it works as well as you might expect. It's just so finicky to aim and move around when you're up there, you'll rarely be able to pull it off, trying to get the right angle for so long that the enemies are all dead, and the other players are advancing without you. Fuck's sake.
Here is a follow-up report on the flying objects.
When it comes to the story, I certainly won't be going through it like I did with 4.1, but there's quite a lot here that's interesting or funny enough to talk about. Since the EDF series works in sets of 2, EDF 5 is a reset, letting Sandlot alter things here and there without the constraints of continuity. In this universe, the Earth Defense Force seems to be an attraction of some kind, a potential gimmick army that doesn't look to be in use as of yet, and is only now just opening to the public. That's the idea I get from the introduction tutorial mission anyway. You're a normal worker helping out before the big day.
You must be the newbie. Shall we start? Our job today is to direct traffic. You see, today is open house, and we're expecting a lot of visitors. It's gonna be a busy day.
The attention to detail for this is great, as the tutorial guy has specific dialogue depending on which class you picked, explaining what your role was. The Ranger is a security guard who's meant to direct traffic during the busy open house. The Air Raider is a mechanic and is licensed to operate large vehicles, and has access to military radio systems, I guess. The Fencer is a human forklift, a civilian wearing a military exoskeleton for the use of moving around bulky items, and the Wing Diver is just for entertainment purposes. She's part of the aerial unit that's putting on a show after the tours.
Visitors will watch a flying show at the end of their tour. So that's the aerial unit. I wish I could fly too. Looking forward to your show.
Wild. This is a level many might not even play, as it's only available in offline mode. It's not the first mission when online like it is in single player. I get why people might want to avoid it. Heck, even the first real level has a lot of walking around doing nothing, but I think this sets the stage well, looks really cool with the exoskeletons and flashing lights and so on as you walk around the base, and is the perfect starting point when taking the ending to the game into account. Before that though, I have to give this instructor guy some love. He's one of the first to die from the alien invasion, and he was so reassuring on our walkthrough of the base.
Monsters! Run! Run!
Don't worry, it's fine. Huh? What happened? The lights will return to normal soon.
What happened? He was eaten! George was eaten!
Don't worry. Soldiers love making jokes like these. Again? Something wrong with the circuit? Just switch on the light and it'll be fine. Maybe something did happen.
Poor guy just wanted us to get to our next spot, and...
Behind this gate is... Huh?
Help!
Yeah, we'll always remember Instructor Doofus. I've already gone through how great it is that we fight through the base, to the surface, then come back here later on in the game with the miniature 4-phase mission arc, so I won't go through that again, but I did allude to something earlier I want to touch on right now. After the first 11 or so missions, the description says you're now a full EDF soldier, and it's been 5 months since the alien invasion started. There's a reason for this time skip. Remember us trying to take down the golden teleportation ships? Yeah, we never figured out how to destroy them, but the commander and the strategic command lady discuss it during a spider level, and she says the Air Force is currently working on building a device that can shoot down the dropships, but it won't be ready for another 2 months. We could assume it took even longer than that, given the extra time passing, but here's the best part. After you load into the first snow level, again, a big time skip away from the previous mission, your squad commends you for looking like a real EDF soldier, which is fun.
It suits you, comrade.
Huh. You look like you mean business.
I trust you have my back.
But then immediately, the strategic command lady says the Air Force units they built to take down the teleportation ships have all been destroyed. Just as soon as that info came and went, our commander moves on and wonders what to do next. No anger, just acceptance.
How are the new types doing?
They were all destroyed.
Isn't there a way to shoot down the teleportation ships?
Considering the solution is what you expected would be, to have infantry fire at them when their hatch opens, it's absolutely ridiculous that the EDF army just let these ships fly about for 5 months, infesting the world, dwindling the human population by 20% even.
We have lost 20% of the total population in the past 5 months. Soon the human race will be facing extinction.
20%? That doesn't sound too bad.
While waiting for the Air Force's ace in the hole, only for that to be destroyed, I guess, and moved on within a few sentences. If this were any other game, this would be dumb, but it's Earth Defense Force, and this is part of the show, so it's great. Something that only dawned on me near the end of my time editing this video, the primers must have some level of respect for the EDF. I mean, why else would they launch this many teleportation anchors at such a remote location? We don't have a whole lot of information to go on, but obviously an alien invasion has never happened, given how much our soldiers freak out and are in denial about flying saucers and such in the early game.
It penetrated the enemies with a single shot!
They even developed this kind of weapon?
If the aliens hadn't come, would these weapons be used on human beings?
The base we're in at the start was only just opening to the public, but considering there are many bases all around the globe, surely the EDF as a concept can't be brand new or anything. Even still though, this untested alien fighting force somehow got the attention of the primers even before the war began, which must mean what little they saw when scouting the Earth scared them enough to focus on these guys immediately, which is hilarious. I mean, we are equipped with fucking rocket launchers and death lasers, so maybe they were onto something, but I mean, come on. The majority of the story is what you'd expect in an EDF title, so I won't go through it step by step by any means. In a game like this, the brunt of the narrative is carried by the dialogue, either from your squad mates, the EDF radio people like the Chief Commander or Strategic Command Lady, and lastly, for this game, the worldwide news alerts. The latter is especially fun, as they're sometimes accompanied by a charming bit of music before and afterwards.
Earlier today,
You'll mostly hear these near the start of the game, but even with their limited use, that jingle still rattles around in my head clear as day. So delightful. Some side stories with the worldwide reports include people being upset at the EDF for not trying to talk with the aliens and use dialogue to solve our problems.
This time we can certainly resolve our issues through dialogue as well.
all negotiations have failed. It's not that we can't express ourselves, it's that they never wanted to talk in the first place.
So it's only us thinking that we're both humanoids.
The economy taking a hit from the war.
Since the alien invasion, the entire world has been engulfed in flames. The economy has taken its toll as well. More businesses are shutting down, which leads to lower employment rate. There has not been a concrete policy that fights unemployment.
Which has a surprising bit of follow-through later on, as eventually the government offers civilians a large sum of money to join the EDF to fight off the bugs.
The government outlines stronger relief measures to tackle unemployment. Each new EDF recruit will receive $50,000 US, and an extra 500,000 more after 1 year of service.
There's a lot more of these talking points that persist through a handful or a dozen levels, like the frogs hopefully being afraid of the water, for instance. As great as all of that is, there's one more chunk of narrative that truly takes the cake. In 4.1, there were the rumblings of the legendary hero that took down the mothership all those years ago in the first invasion, which was a really enjoyable through line to listen for, especially near the end of the game. EDF 5 has something similar, but it doesn't start until the game is nearly over. After a while, one of our main radio people gets replaced with a lady who is, frankly, very naive and out of touch. She acts surprised when we take down dropships, even though we've already done that throughout the game.
I can't believe you shot down a teleportation ship.
I can't believe you shot down a teleportation ship. I can't believe I've been doing this the entire game.
A teleportation ship was shot down. Unbelievable. Enemy has been eliminated. Thank you.
She's quick to have a nervous breakdown about the bleakness of this alien war and so on. After a while, though, a very specific talking point starts up.
I'm looking for God.
She brings up the egg-shaped ship.
What are you talking about?
According to Indian mythology, egg-shaped ships descended from the skies, and out from within came God.
This turns into an obsession, where in basically every mission from here on out, she talks about trying to find the egg-shaped ship. The one from every major religion and mythology on Earth. It has to be out there. Where is it? Where is it?
If we could just find the egg-shaped ship.
Here we go again.
The egg-shaped ship is a shared motif in all mythologies. I don't think that's a coincidence. The egg-shaped spaceship that carried God must exist.
Our commander guy isn't really having it, but he admits that the command center of the aliens, if it exists, is still something worth finding, as taking that down could swing the tides of the war. While we've already taken down a few mothership things in the past, or at least Giganto-Fortress things that are absurd and kind of tedious, there's supposedly 11 motherships in total, and near the end, the 11th one is found and approaches us for an all-out war. This feels like a combination of the 2017 end boss mothership and the 4.1 second phase Earth Eater final boss.
The ship that existed in the Age of Gods. The one that carries God. I finally found it!
I'll be the one who promotes it.
Now destroy it! Hurry up!
It's pretty neat, a nice culmination to the game as expected. What was not expected, however, is what comes next.
Is that God?
That's right, EDF included the trope where you fight God at the end. This is what I'm talking about. We go from being civilians, training to be traffic control security guards or whatever, all the way to fighting Pepsi Man at the end. God, sorry. Yeah, God at the end. His name is Nameless, and this boss fight is fucking nuts, man. There's not a whole lot here. He spawns in some goobers now and then, he has a lot of godly attacks, he floats and flies around, and you can even eventually remove his limbs like the other frog humans. Mechanically, it's nothing to write home about, but I just can't believe the madmen actually did it. They did the Japanese RPG thing, where you start off bumbling around and eventually take on God itself. Afterwards, we get the usual epilogue, the aliens take the Nameless's body back and leave, the war is over. The world's population now sits at 10%, the Earth is now in a new dark age. Holy shit. There's hope, though, because the EDF is always here and ready. I guess. I don't know how EDF 6 is going to handle the next part of this story, but I am all for it. I can't wait. Well, I can, since I'm specifically waiting for the English-translated North American release instead of playing the currently available Japanese version, but you get it. There's a few miscellaneous things I wanted to talk about that are fairly small, but nonetheless significant. The HUD is a bit different from 4.1, most notably you can see all of your equipment at a glance. When you're a fencer or ranger with certain loadouts, it won't really matter, but it's helpful as a wing diver and air raider since a lot of their tools have passive reloads and recharges. Even for the ranger though, you can see their vehicle and its status in the upper right. A very nice update. While some of the online hassle seen in 4.1 has been somewhat touched up, such as being able to see how long players of a lobby have been in a mission when on the list screen, being able to filter out rooms that have a passcode, and so on, there's one thing remaining that utterly annoys me to no end. Remember me talking about how if you played online mode in 4.1 by yourself, you get the enemy health and damage equivalent to the 4-player balancing? Yeah, that's still here, but even worse this time, as the medals can only be unlocked online. In 4.1, I mentioned that they didn't sync up between offline and online, which was frustrating and I hated it, as you could complete all of normal as a ranger in offline mode, and it wouldn't help your percentage at all. That said, for the achievement of complete game on normal as ranger, that would still count. In EDF 5, all the achievements are based on percentage. It goes in increments of 5% all the way to 60, then increments of 2% to 100. You can't work on this by playing offline at all, you have to play online to grow that percentage completion. Sometimes, I know it might sound crazy, I prefer to play the game alone, so this arbitrary increased difficulty nonsense for solo online players is absolutely fucking stupid. It's such a mess, since in 3 separate ways I don't get what I want. I can't up my percentage in offline mode, likely because there are no armor and weapon limits there, but guess what? I want there to be a way to turn weapon and armor limits on in offline mode. Just make that an option in the settings for this, and there you go, sync the medals and we'd be good. But no, you have to play online for any of this to count, but you better not play alone, you fucking moron. Now it's nearly impossible to beat because it's balanced around more players, and the weapon and armor limits are mandatory in online mode, duh. It's just awful, I can't stand it. It sometimes feels ridiculously easy when playing online with 4 players, which isn't what I want at all. I don't know why developers sometimes do shit like this, where they go so far out of their way to encourage people to play online, but I really hope this isn't a thing in the future. The cherry on top is that levels still don't unlock for both sets. I've beaten the game twice through and online, but sorry idiot, you don't have access to all of the missions offline, go fuck yourself. Legitimately, this is the one area of the game I think is actually bad. This isn't me trying to include all angles for a fair review, it just really pisses me off. Before wrapping up, there's the DLC levels, and there's not a whole lot to say about them. I mean, I did end up writing 5 pages dedicated to the DLC packs, but okay, maybe I do have some stuff to say. There's the Extra Challenge Pack and the Super Challenge Pack. On the surface, they're exactly what I expected them to be, extremely hard while skimping out on the voice lines from the NPC radio people that I love so much. Skimping out is actually an understatement. In EDF 5's DLC, opposed to 4.1, Sandlot didn't even try to make it sound like a base game mission. There's literally 0 radio chatter, zip, nothing, nada. The names are all generic, simply being engage blank enemy 1, 2, 3, and etc., with the descriptions just saying hints and tips, and what you'll be doing, or in the case of the last few, hey, maybe level up your armor and weapons before taking this one on, it's kinda hard. Honestly, all of this is fine. This is extra content, more levels for the hardcore players, so using up interesting sounding titles would be a waste, and the flavor text doesn't need to be anything captivating by any means either. You could easily critique all of this by saying it's low effort content compared to the base game, and I alluded to that in my 4.1 video, but I'm not here to begrudge Sandlot for this or anything, it's fine. In fact, I'd say I had a better time with the DLC than I was predicting I would, but we're not there yet. In the Extra Challenge Pack, some levels are meh, and others are actually pretty great. My favorite in this DLC was exploring an EDF base, which is just the palette swap underground levels if you remember. Not only are the anthills fun to seek out and destroy, sometimes forcing you to slowly gain ground inch by inch, advancing through the hectic waves of spiders and ants, but they also give you vehicles now and then, like mechs and tanks, to utilize in the next bit of gameplay. Of course, I wouldn't want every EDF mission to feel this handcrafted and curated, but it's great for a change of pace if nothing else. It was fun, and even more, the ending showed off new enemies. Kind of. Armored frog humans. Before, the cosmonauts were the only armored infantry, and the frogs were just free-dogging it in their birthday suit. Some took advantage of that, though, like the one dude who had a grand old time tanning his balls.
Dude, you know what he looks like right now? He looks like that one, like, dude in the Tucker Carlson thing that was trying to suntan his balls. Like, he looks like he's presenting his balls like that. That's what this frog looks like. He looks like he's tanning his testicles right now. He's got...
If you want to see that full clip, I posted it in all its glory to my secondary channel. Anyway, to see some of them in their own style of armor, it definitely is cool, but the next level, where you're on the surface and they keep coming from all sides, awful. I hated this level so much, so goddamn much. Not fun, just difficult for the sake of it, and no terrain of any kind to take advantage of. At the very least, these look to be kind of connected, or there was an attempt to link these together anyway. We arrived at base 236, cleared it out, and defended the surface afterwards. I can absolutely dig it, I like the idea, it's just the execution that's lacking. Funnily enough, that's the only set in all of the DLC mission packs that has some form of through line. Almost makes me wonder if these were simply cut from the main game? Going to rescue other EDF bases sounds fucking awesome on paper, so I can only hope this idea returns in future titles. I can tell the Fallout games and their vaults have left a strong impression on me. Anything resembling that type of dungeon expedition gets me oddly excited. The main gimmick to these DLC levels is the armored frog infantry, and the regular presence of golden ants and silver spiders, the former just obliterating you with a single acid spray, the latter boasting an absurd amount of health. Besides the infiltrate the base level, the missions that stuck out the most were the ones that included Deroys and Aranea. The Aranæus one was the second of the underground stages, where there's a dozen or so mechanized anthills protected by giant webs. One downfall here, and something I was going to bring up in the 4.1 DLC levels discussion, but I ended up cutting it, is the problem with their spider wire they throw out. It's simply far too accurate. It can hit you around a corner, it feels like, but worse, it can phase through the environment if it needs to, which can result in a situation like this, where you're basically strung up and left to die. The only way to get out of this grab is to deal damage to the spider holding you, but you can't. He's behind a wall or something. So stupid. I do like this level quite a lot though, besides this issue, meticulously making my way through and taking out the Aranea first, then picking off the bug spawners when I could, and, you know, finding the time to kite the enemies around so I could pick up my friend now and again. Oh man, it was stressful as hell, but worth it in the end. The same sentiment goes for Engage Aliens 3. We failed this mission many times over, trying out a few different weapon loadouts and strategies. It took us 50 minutes or so in total, but man, that successful attempt was exhilarating. The mix of frog humans, Deroys, ambush parties here and there, and the tadpole flyers was nuts. That said, the final level of the first DLC, with the outpost, took us over an hour. That might not sound crazy given that I just said the Deroy frog ambush one took 50 minutes, but those 50 minutes were spread out through multiple efforts. The outpost level was one attempt. We did it first try, but it took us an hour. This is something I could have mentioned earlier about certain levels in the base game, especially when on Hardest or Inferno, but for the DLC it's even more applicable, so I'll lay it out right now. If I haven't explicitly conveyed this before in previous videos, I'll do so as blunt as I can before moving on. There aren't any checkpoints in the game. You don't get to retry from the middle of the mission, ever. You have to start over from the beginning. This is why some of the retreat levels were tedious, like I said, and is especially why keeping a certain percentage of the items you've collected after you fail is a somewhat welcome consideration. Difficulty and length aren't an issue in a vacuum for this series, but when they combine together, it can either be extremely rewarding or utterly demoralizing. This outpost level taking us an entire hour was great, but only because we did it. All those close calls with the silver spiders, with the golden ants, with the colonies of frogs were thrilling and tense, eventually triggering a wave of catharsis that is oh so addicting, but if we had died 45 minutes in, we likely would have stopped playing for the day. That is a lot of time to invest in a game for practically nothing. People say the Soul series is hard and punishing, but honestly, those games don't ever set you back nearly as much as certain missions can in EDF. I'm not sure if I know a solution to this, or if there even needs to be one. If we knew we'd get a checkpoint in a mission after a while, would that same level of satisfaction be felt when winning the day? How would it even work? Would we spawn in exactly where we were when the checkpoint triggered, with our exact health and items on the ground, enemies in their same spots, and all the buildings either destroyed or intact?
I'm hiding behind the only building left in this city.
Sounds a little infeasible with how much shit goes on in these games. It's a quandary, one that I'm not sure how to feel about. Getting a share of the weapon and armor drops as a consolation is a solution that I think almost makes up for it, as it really eases the sting of losing in the latter stages of a DLC level on hard, or the base game missions on hardest, but I do think it's needlessly punishing that Inferno doesn't let you keep any of it. On one hand, I can maybe understand the thought process, since you should have to prove you really have enough armor and skill to beat a level on Inferno to claim the rewards, i.e. some crazy weapons. This would be especially pertinent for offline-only EDF games like 2017, for instance. But with how EDF 5 works, I don't really see that as a justifiable reason for this cruelty of wasting your time if you fail a mission on Inferno. If the idea is to keep noobs from getting high-leveled gear immediately without effort, that makes no sense here, as in online mode, until you beat the game with 70% completion, which means getting through hard with all 4 classes essentially, you have to deal with the armor and weapon limits. These high-powered guns will only be available on Inferno anyway, so it's not like newbies can take it to lower difficulties and cheese the game. In offline mode that could happen, but trying this method there makes it even less likely they'd be able to nab enough items in Inferno for them to unlock something on failure, especially if it was something like 10% of the items this time, since they'd be alone and without any armor. Plus, even if all that wasn't the case, there's a much simpler way to obtain Inferno tier guns early on. Nothing is stopping a high-leveled party from letting a green-as-grass player be the dead weight and carry them through the entirety of a few Inferno missions in full. Look at that. Boom, an easy workaround to this nonsense. I just don't get it. The only people this 0% of items on death for Inferno stuff hurts are players who are genuinely playing through Inferno difficulty. So many times I threw my head against the wall on Inferno going solo, and much like with some of the DLC missions, it was a great time, until the bullshit happens, and then my trepidatious and carefully played 20 minutes was all for fucking nothing. Either carry over the consolation prize to Inferno, or grant a checkpoint somewhere in there. As it is now, I have no issue going through hardest, but Inferno completion just feels like a waste of time, personally. I do quite like the many changes on these higher difficulties, more than I was expecting even. Of course, the appearance of the different colored bugs and such is the standard, and is welcome, but I also noticed a few other small, but significant alterations. In the first B level, Flying Killers, a Queen variant shows up on hardest where it wasn't there previously. In the Iron Wall level, you start on the roofs on hard or lower, but hardest and Inferno you're placed on the ground, so you can't take advantage of that extra height as a ranger or air raider. The dropships spin their hatch coverings much faster on higher difficulties, which honestly does make it more challenging to take them out, especially as a wing diver. I also noticed more enemies in the groups that would roam around in the alien infantry levels, more hostiles as a whole, such as the red frogs showing up on Sniper Team, and of course, everything is much faster, shoots more frequently, and fires more of that thing in the case of the ants and spiders. Personally, I think the insects on Inferno are manageable, but the drones and infantry are too much. The red drones you can barely keep on screen, which sure could make homing weapons more viable, but it's still annoying. The red frogs fire so goddamn rapidly, you basically have to ambush them to have a chance. They will debilitate your movement and keep on the pressure if more than one sneaks up on you, and the oversized infantry overall are ridiculously fast. It's as if the Nameless had his frog slaves do plyometric and agility training before this war began. Good lord, their webbed feet dart around lightning quick. All this is to say, hardest, for me, feels about right. It does say you don't have to play Inferno when you hover over it, so maybe I should take that advice. However, I remember when playing 4.1, hard felt like the most I'd want to push myself through, and now hardest is the difficulty I'm enjoying the most, so maybe it'll just keep building, and in EDF 6, I'll be here to praise Inferno. We'll see. Getting back on track with the DLC, Mission Pack 2 is basically more of the same, with a couple of newish things, and some ungodly grueling levels near the end. I'll get to that soon though. There's a mission that mostly consists of drone ships with what looks like gigantic variations of them. They are kinda like bombers, and they wreck all buildings in their path. There's also an alien infantry unit that has a new sniper, but it's just a different color laser essentially. We didn't even realize this was the new guy as it was happening. But then again, the Dragoon Lances are so beefy strong, no alien or frog stands a chance.
I'm feeling alright.
Poor guy was traumatized. He hid behind a building.
There's a handful of specific missions this time around that really caught my eye. Engage Teleportation Anchors 2 specifically, although it took 40 minutes through a half dozen attempts, provided the sensation I don't think I've ever felt while playing this game with my friend. Basically, there's a variety of spawners on the map already, and taking each one out triggers something else, and those trigger something else afterwards. The links between chain reactions is kind of wild, actually. For instance, I forgot about the Black Ant Anchor for a long time, but good thing, since that one spawns in the Silver Spider King Anchor once it's destroyed.
Sort of Scrubs, where oh, a new anchor! Oh, it's a good... Dude, me keeping the ants one alive is what prevented the Silver Spiders from spawning. What? How would we even have known that?
Anyway, after a while we had to work together to fend off the newly emerged King Silver Spider or Queen Golden Ant, and the tandem ass-kicking we dished out was something else. He was in his mech dealing a load of damage, while I was dancing around doing what I could with my Wing Diver and Dragoon Lance. It felt like we were Goku and Vegeta taking on Broly or something. I don't know, just a really fun bout of impromptu teamwork to take the behemoths down and keep us both alive. The next mission, Underground 3, took us a couple play sessions and a grand total of 2 hours of our life to finally conquer. The way this stage ambushes you with a horde of bugs in set areas is chaotic and hard to understand on the outset, since you're likely trying to rush down the Aranea. What's worse, or perhaps even more clever, is that the ambushes don't trigger when an Aranea dies, they trigger when you walk past a certain invisible line, and the Aranea's spider wire can pull you past those lines and spawn the bugs without your consent. There's really no ideal. Sprinting to clear out the Aranea will start the chain reaction of insects to swarm from behind, but slowly waddling your way towards the dreaded spiders might see you get grabbed by them and be even less prepared for the invasion of bugs. Add on the fact that the cave layout itself is unlike any other cave in the game, with its twists and turns and wild verticality, with walls providing ample hiding room for the Aranea. Plus there's silver spiders, golden ants, and queen ants to boot. Jesus, this one was ridiculous. 2 of them after this are really fun though. A mission consisting of silver spiders exclusively, where the gimmick is, I guess, to travel all the way to the 2 beaches way over yonder, as there lies 2 sets of 2 incredibly powerful mechs to play with. These things are ferocious with their damage potential, but even better, they're absurdly agile. Their walking speed is faster than any other mech, they can turn with ease, and their jumps cover a crazy distance. I really enjoyed the idea of this level, but I'm not sure I fully understand Sandlot's thought process for the map layout as a whole. They're comically far away from your starting position. If you're observant, you'll even notice that you spawn in the corner of the play space. They really wanted you to make the difficult trek over there, and I don't particularly find that aspect about it very fun. Since my friend and I, main air raider and wing diver respectively, what we ended up doing was using myself as a valet, essentially. I'd fly over, hop in the mech, then froggy jump all the way back, letting him get in, and then we'd make our way to the other mechs. Kinda silly, but either way, the Blazer mechs themselves are a blast to pilot, and the level itself drops so many items. This was one we came back to for both grinding purposes and for fun. The same went for the next mission. At first blush, it looks like you're in the same environment as the previous level, but then it hit me. Holy shit, look at the red border on the minimap. This island is the play space and nothing else. Anchors drop in, some being easy like black ants and spiders, other being much more challenging, such as silver spiders and golden ants. The last wave, there's a dozen or so that all land around the island, and you're given a grace period where no enemies spawn in for 20 seconds or so. In that time, you're meant to bum rush as many down as you can. It's a really great time, something that felt distinct, even when comparing it to the other 100+ missions in EDF5. Maybe it's because I was playing these with my friend this time, or that my expectations were lower, but I'd say I had a better time with the DLC mission packs in EDF5 than in 4.1. The mission titles and descriptions being appropriately simple may have helped too. As much as I'd like to confess that I finally get it, that I'm, at last, in the proper headspace to get the most out of the DLC, I have to admit, I think the quality of life feature of obtaining items even if you fail helped a ton here. If all those failures after a half hour to an hour resulted in nothing, oh man, fuck off. As much as these DLC levels can get nuts, I was a little underwhelmed with the kaiju monster battle. Engage mysterious monster certainly alludes to something we haven't seen before, right? There's a couple of Erginuses, then a few more show up, and some more afterwards, then an Archelaus to close it out. Oh, that's it? I was expecting a red Archelaus, or at the very least a red bigger Erginus. I can't be too upset though, as the next mission more than made up for this one's lack of ridiculousness. 4 hives, 2 giant anchors, armored frogs spawn in after a while, as well as a queen ant, king spider, and queen wasp. I was initially going to say fuck this level, but in all honesty, it was refreshing to have to grind a bit, both for new weapons and upgrades, before being able to have a solid shot at it. Plus, our tactic of taking all the hives down at once was a complete non-starter. Once you slow it down and deal with the spawners one by one, it's a lot more manageable. I wish I could say the same shift in strategies helped with the following mission. This is Last Stand 2, the previous level being Last Stand 1. Initially, this looks to be a simple task. If it's just the drone bombers, non-red drones, Deroys, and silver spiders, that's not too bad. Except there's so much more. golden ants and frog humans spawn in on both sides, which isn't awful, but fuck me, those 3 teleportation dropships that apparently weren't doing anything as of yet now start dropping bees, and frogs spawn in, and tadpoles spawn in. This was the level that truly broke us.
God, there's some blue tadpoles too.
My guy, you have to find a way to be more helpful than this. I can't contend with bees.
I know. Would it be worth going to the Allies?
It'd be worth you getting your fucking head on straight and being helpful.
Okay, alright.
It'd be worth going to the Allies.
I will. You get me up, I'll drive over there. I'm doing what I can.
You say that, but I'm still mad at you. So.
I'm a support class. I'm sorry.
You're sure trying to support me, all right? In my fucking anger management course, which is just the fucking play the DLC packs 100 times. Destroy the Type 2 drones.
Fuck these missions, dude. Like, I wish everything would stop being in my fucking way.
You don't like these missions anymore?
Missions are great.
I feel like you're saying.
A great time.
We did quite a few bouts of grinding on earlier missions for upgrades and armor, tried it at least a dozen or so times, and we even had to take a hiatus for a few days, since we were kind of going insane at the overwhelming percentage of our lives that were being taken up by this game at that point. There was one attempt where we finally broke through, only to discover that after all that, fucking like 8 or 10 variants of king and queen monsters all charge in at once. At least 2 king spiders, a silver king, a couple queen ants, a golden queen, maybe 2, a normal and a red death queen. Oh god. I was ready to call it there, to never play this DLC again, but no, we came back a few days later. This was definitely a level where we had to have a very specific strategy and series of events to go perfectly right to finally pull it off, but yeah, we did it. I wasn't recording at that point since I had no room left on my fucking hard drive, so I was saving it for the last mission, but trust me, we did it. It happened. I promise. The final level, The Last Stand 3, is a variation of the penultimate base game mission with the mothership. This time we didn't need a few days, we somehow pulled it off in one session. A 3.5-hour session, where the successful attempt took about an hour and 40 minutes. Jesus Christ. At one point my controller was about to die even, and I had to make the swap mid-mission. It was tense, but I managed to pull it off, just in time to not get blown away by an ant. I'm pretty sure, anyway. My sphincter wouldn't lie to me. I'm not changing the batteries. Changing them. Changing batteries. Changing batteries. I'm good. Holy shit. Those fucking golden ants almost killed me. In all honesty, this hour and 40 minutes could have been shortened up quite a bit after we learned some crucial information. A lot of the enemies keep spawning in, so taking everything out, hoping it'll never come back, isn't necessary.
I'm directly under the mothership. You're pretty close to directly under the mothership.
Oh my god.
Move.
Yeah. I'm playing a wing diver, constantly kiting around.
Right.
I just saw it drop a frog.
3, 2, 1.
I just saw it drop a frog, dude. I just saw it drop a frog.
Dropping frogs. It's so fucking foggy. If it wasn't so foggy, it'd be a lot easier for me to kill these things.
My guy, this mission has a lot more going on with it that's not good than just it being foggy.
No.
Why do they have them respawn, huh?
Just seems excessive.
Oh, really? You know what? That's a good tagline for all of this DLC. You know, it just seems excessive.
Well said.
Maybe I'll put that in the video at the end.
And why would they... Look, I don't mind them, like, respawning, like, small things. King Silver Spiders are not small things.
Yes, the Silver King Spiders respawn. Awesome.
Is that another king?
I just saw it too, yep. Definitely
they are
is.
respawning, aren't they?
The Golden Queens didn't, it seemed like, but we're still unsure if the floating pieces remaining around the mothership determines which enemies keep coming back. Either way, the thankfully non-respawnable Deroys were the first roadblock, then the 4 anchors that land on the map, but then... I mean, I don't know how others played this game, but if we didn't have the Wing Diver unit, I don't know how this could have worked. Having me kite the enemies away while grabbing health here and there, only to pick up my air raider for him to launch something big, is definitely something we're used to doing in tough levels. Them coming out of the dropship, so I'm gonna come save you quick. Oh, I say that as there's a bunch of golden ants around you, though.
Yeah, you should not. You should kill the.
I should do all the work, and then I should save you, and everything's all safe. Is what you're saying?
That's right.
Do you hear? Do you hear
I'm the
how ridiculous that is? Right? You hear that?
I'm the Kuwabara.
You hear how ridiculous it is. Right? But here it seemed essential. I can take out golden ants, no problem. Frogs aren't a huge threat. Silver spiders, and even golden queens when I get some room, sure. But fuck me, having enough energy to launch an attack at the mothership itself while also keeping enough fuel to run away and dodge all around? It's insane. I'm so glad we had a bulge laser. Like I've talked about in the past with these DLC packs, this was fun on that last attempt, exhilarating and intense, but only because we did it that time. If we would have died 45 minutes in, we would have been pleading for the game to skip us to the Deroy part, since that's when the level actually starts for us. Kill dumb frogs, which are spread out 3 miles apart it felt like, fire at mothership for 10 minutes, then the Deroys drop down. Like, I know what I said about not having checkpoints, but fuck me, so many levels could benefit from you skipping to the part where stuff starts happening. When going back to get some more footage, with the Urganist extermination mission specifically, I couldn't believe how long it took for the action to finally start. You and your EDF crew have to walk up to it for eons, all while nothing is happening. This is cool for world building, for story dialogue, to set the mood, absolutely, but much like unskippable cutscenes in other games, if you have to retry this level after death, this is only going to worsen your mood. Cave Expedition number 2? Again, it's neat that you have a squad with you that physically advances through the underground environment, but if you, say, tried this on Inferno and died a few times, boy, what a goddamn waste of time. The enemy ambushes trigger based on where they are, so all you can really do is clear out everything that's there right away, then wait for them to pass the invisible lines. Something needs to be done. There's far too much filler that you can't do anything about when retrying difficult missions. For this final level, you are technically in combat right away, but these mothership bits don't drop anything, so if you die to the Deroys or Anchor section, guess what? Your frustrations aren't put at ease at all. There's no consolation to be found here. Neither would there be, of course, on Inferno, but fuck that. Never, ever trying this level on anything higher than hard. Let's just say I'm glad I don't have to play these DLC levels again. Some are enjoyable enough that we could return to them in the future, like the cool mech silver spider one, the island of anchors, the pylons on the hillside, and maybe that one cave mission I liked. It was quite the experience this time around, to push through on hard with the weapon and armor limits turned on. No cheesing here, I felt the pain the developers were intending me to feel. Congratulations, Sandlot. Now go release EDF6 in North America, fuck's sake. That's Earth Defense Force 5. A little long, but with how many variables Sandlot has to play with, I kind of get the giant mission count. There are absolutely still issues here that are glaring for me, such as the Inferno difficulty nonsense, the unskippable filler, the items being unretrievable when in water, and offline being treated like chopped liver, not being connected to achievements or completion, or having weapon and armor limits. That said, I still think the game is fantastic. The added weather effects were awesome. The new enemies and updates to old ones were excellent, especially the dreadful Beastmasters themselves, the frog humans, and grey alien cosmonauts. The visual updates, the new equipment slot, the upgrading of your weapons, the retaining of items on death, the charming new song for our soldiers to sing, all of the dialogue through the radio chatter and our squad mates, the music. Oh man, the music! The soundtrack for EDF 5 is a certified banger. I've used the lobby song for 3 EDF videos at this point. It's overall a great package. I love 4.1 to death, I really do, but if someone asked me which Earth Defense Force game to really give a try, it'd have to be EDF 5. Honestly, one of my favorite games, and with the current trajectory Sandlot is on, I can only imagine how much I'll love EDF 6. I'm sure the English translated release will come out any day now, right? Right? Thanks for watching this big EDF 5 review. If you'd like to support me on Patreon, I'd be appreciative, and you could even see your names on screen like so. If you're really special, and I publish a video and forget to put your name at the end, you might even get your name at the end twice the very next video. Yeah, sorry patrons, my bad. I was in such a rush to get that recommendation video out that it just slipped my mind. Anyway, I hope you like what I have in store for October, and maybe even November. I'll see you next time, have a good one. Can you come pick me up, please?
Heavy.
What did you say?
You're heavy!
What? Hang on. I am curious. Like, do I have you turned down or something?
Alright.
What do you mean I'm heavy? What does that even mean I'm heavy? What is that even talking about? What are you talking about?
I'm just saying.
Oh, because pick me up.
People up's hard. People up's hard. It's hard, man. It's hard. 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 It's hard.
I hear you loud and clear.
Warriors, hard ones.
Glad there's like a built-in compressor or something on Steam.